hearing. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Peter Talbot.
Here.
Jim Jinks.
Here.
Fiona Pearson.
Here.
Greg Wolf. Lou Tedisco. Don Wall.
Here.
David Belliver. Patricia Kramer. Here. Deb Mankey. Here. Quorum is present.
Please rise and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you read the legal notice, please?
Pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes, Section 7-163E, the town of Cheshire hereby notices its intent to consider the sale of the following property and any structures located thereon: 422 North Brooksville Road, Cheshire, Connecticut 06410. The town council of the town of Cheshire will hold a public hearing for public comment on Thursday, April 23rd, 2026 at 6:30 p.m. in the town council chambers, Cheshire Town Hall, 84 South Main Street, Cheshire, Connecticut. In addition to submitting comment at the public hearing, comments may also be emailed to comments@cheshireCT.gov. Comments must be received by noon on April 23rd, 2026 to be read into the record.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Kimball, would you do a ever so brief presentation on the hearing subject?
Sure thing, no problem. So this hearing tonight, again, is for the sale of 422 North Brooksville. The town acquired 422 North Brooksville. This is the residential property directly adjacent to Norton School, again, on North Brooksville. We acquired it in 2023 for $203,000. And it was a .81 acre property. The town incorporated, subdivided about a third of an acre into the new Norton, or expanding the Norton property as part of the plans for the Norton School. And then now we listed the property, received a few offers, and had the highest offer, cash offer, at $251,000. And so that sale is before the council. The action will be before the council at our next meeting. Tonight is a hearing as part of the process to hear from residents or any interested parties as to the prospect of selling that property, just like we would with any town property if we dispose of it. That's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Kimball. If any members of the public would like to speak on the hearing topic, they may do so by utilizing the podium to my right, your left. Seeing none, I'll close this public hearing. Which brings us to the Joint Town Council Special Meeting and Budget Committee meeting of Thursday, April 23rd. We have called the roll and done the pledge. Brings us to item 3, acceptance and appropriation of the Department of Children and Families Youth Service Bureau grant in the amount of $36,799 to support programs and activities of the Cheshire Youth Services Division. Ms. Kramer, do you have the resolution in front of you?
No.
Okay. Does anyone have the resolution in front of them?
The one day I left my.
My computer's like doing this.
Okay, it's spinning, yeah.
Oh, I have a hard copy from.
Oh,
our-
beautiful. Then, Ms. Kramer, would you please read the resolution?
Be it resolved that the Town Council approves Resolution 042326-01. Be it resolved that the Town Council hereby accepts a Youth Services Bureau grant from the Department of Children and Families in the total amount of $36,799. And be it further resolved that the Town Council hereby appropriates $17,098 to the general fund to offset the salaries of the youth and family counselors, and $19,701 to the Youth Services Bureau Enhancement Fund to support the programs and activities of the Cheshire Youth Services Division. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kramer. Thank you, Mr. Jinks. Mr. Kimball, would you like to kick off discussion,
Sure.
please?
So this is a grant we've received in the past. As you see here, this includes the total grant award of $36,799. And again, as stated in the resolution, helps offset some of the salaries from the Youth and Family Division of our Human Services Department. And then there's additional funds as part of the grant program, prescribed by the grant program, to be deposited into the Youth Service Bureau Enhancement Fund, which supports programs and activities of our Youth Services Department.
Questions or comments from colleagues? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously by those present. Item 4 is an A24 referral to the Planning and Zoning Commission for the acceptance of property located at Peck Lane from the Department of Transportation and the transfer of said property to the owner of 645 Peck Lane for the purpose of a utility easement. Ms. Kramer, do you have that as well? Since you're sitting next to the shall answer man.
Be it resolved that the Town Council approves Resolution 042326-02. Be it resolved that pursuant to Section 8-24 of the Connecticut General Statutes, the Town Council hereby refers to the Planning and Zoning Commission for the review and report the acceptance property located at Peck Lane from the Department of Transportation and the transfer of said property to the owner of 645 Peck Lane for the purpose of a utility easement.
Thank you, Ms. Kramer. Thank you, Ms. Pearson. Discussion, back to you, Mr. Kimball.
Sure. So for tonight, this is just a referral to P&Z for an 824 review, but it is kind of a unique situation. So I think Andrew's going to give just a brief overview of what the town is trying to help facilitate on behalf of the property owner and via the Department of Transportation.
Okay, good evening, everyone. This is I'll be brief, but certainly if you have any questions, do let me know. So we were approached by a gentleman who's constructing a home at 645 Peck Lane, which is a large parcel of land if you're heading north on Peck Lane, about a mile before Jarvis Street. Back in the 1980s, there was a road construction project that was done to straighten out Peck Lane. At that time, the DOT ran that project for the town of Cheshire. It was a LoSiP funded project. DOT did all of the takings in order to facilitate the road construction project. As part of the conclusion of that, the properties weren't transferred back to the town of Cheshire. And so during some survey work that was being done by the property owner when he was trying to connect power to the property to get an easement from Eversource, it was learned that there's a triangular piece of property that's still owned by the Department of Transportation. DOT, in their process, is trying to get rid of and clean up their books with all these little pieces of property that they have across all their different municipalities in the state of Connecticut. DOT will not grant the easement to Eversource to connect power to the property. The easiest way to do this is to have DOT transfer the property to the town, and the town in turn transfer the property back to the property owner in order for them to connect the power to the property. This was one of those situations where we had a gentleman come to the town manager's office kind of at a loss. It was missed during the surveying of the property when it was originally conveyed, and he began the construction of the house. So we have a home that's about 95% complete, and he's not able to connect power to the property. They're really at a loss. I've worked with DOT. I've tried to get DOT to grant them a conditional easement. They're not willing to do that. So the easiest way to do this is for the town to accept the property and then to transfer it to the property owner. If DOT was to sell the property to the property owner, it would have to go through a whole process through the state of Connecticut, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the easiest way to do it. So this is really the town acting in good faith to really help one of its residents. He can't get the CO on this multi-million-dollar home until this happens. So in the spirit of grandless growth, this would be a good one in order to get the CO and to have this new family move to town. So it'll go to PZC. The attorney as well as the property owner will do the presentation to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Then I'll come back to you guys for final review and approval after that process concludes.
Thank you, Mr. Martelli.
Sure.
Questions or comments from colleagues? Mr. Jinks.
Thanks. You just out of curiosity, I don't know if it's in the write-up or not, but
Sure.
so the transfer is happening from the DOT to the town to the property owner. Is that like in the same day, or is there any kind of
It would be an instant transfer.
instant? Okay, so there's no like liability concern for the town, and it's just,
We're going to get it, and then we're going to transfer it right to the property owner.
okay.
And I should say that was a recommendation of Attorney D'Onofrio, too.
Correct.
Right, okay, thanks.
Follow up on that, then, the 824 has to be approved at the next meeting of P and Z.
Correct.
Do you, offhand, and I know that Mr. Affey is in the audience tonight, when's the next P and Z meeting?
It would be going to PZC. Give me 1 second. It is their, I believe it's Monday the 4th. To the 4th or the 11th.
That's the next one?
They have a meeting on Monday.
This coming Monday?
Yes.
So is there further action of the council beyond once the P and Z gives the 824 approval?
Yeah, it's going to come back for the actual acceptance and then transfer the property.
So could we do that, assuming P and Z approves the 824 on Monday?
We're going to try to do it at your May council meeting.
Okay. I'm just wondering, I'm trying to get this
To
guy
keep-
electricity as
Yeah,
quickly
no, I
as
appreciate
possible
that.
and a CO. So could we potentially do it Tuesday, the night we do the budget vote?
Tuesday the 5th.
Now, Tuesday, the 28th. Next week, the 28th. The P and Z will meet on the 27th, and we meet on the 28th.
We could certainly try, yeah. The sooner the better. So
Yeah.
if we can do it, we'll
That's,
do it.
I'm trying to.
Yeah, no, I appreciate
I'm
that.
trying to shorten by as much as possible the time frame for this individual, so. Mr. Walsh.
Thank you. Just quick question. I mean, this gentleman, his house is already built, right?
Partially,
Well,
yes.
partially built. What was the holdup? I mean, it's kind of amazing that, we've gotten to this point of him building his house and is it just finding out? I mean, did he buy this property a while ago and the title search didn't show this, or?
The title search did not show it.
Did not
That
show
was
it.
the ultimate problem. And even if you look on our town GIS map, it doesn't even indicate that this is even
Oh,
a
really?
parcel there. It was found by Eversource when Eversource was requested for the easement. They were going to connect the power. They did their own search on the property. They identified this parcel of land that had been, it's basically a remnant of, Peck Lane used to go up on a diagonal and then cut back over. And they straightened out Peck Lane, that triangular piece of property where now the power has to go across to get to the power on Peck Lane.
Okay.
Everyone thought that that piece of property was owned by that parcel, and it wasn't. It's owned by DOT. And unfortunately, with all of this, DOT could solve the problem by just giving an easement to the property owner.
Yeah.
But they're refusing to do so.
Well, I agree
Believe
with
me,
Mr.
I have
Talbot.
tried. I have tried.
No,
I
I'm sure you
tried.
have. I agree with Mr. Talbot. I mean, we got to get this done sooner than later. I just feel bad for this property owner that it's not his fault. It's,
Right.
it's the state's fault. It's not our fault, right?
Right.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Then we'll vote on the referral. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously by those present.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martelli. Moving on to the Energy Performance Contract 2.0 update and request for approval. Ms. Kramer, do you want to be our designated resolution reader tonight?
Sorry. Now they're ready to roll. You want me to just read
I would just read, I think you're fine here, and then the rest is presented attached.
Yeah. Vinny will fill in all the blanks.
If you just read the first part, I can.
Yeah.
There's
give
like
you
3
the
pages
update,
of
and
text. It all looks pretty important, but I will stop after the first or third whereas and hand it over to you.
Okay,
Okay.
sounds great. Thank you.
Be it resolved that the Town Council approves Resolution 042326-03, whereas the Town Council approved a resolution entitled Resolution Authorizing the Execution of a Lease Purchase Agreement to Acquire Equipment. The resolution at its meeting held September 9th, 2025, for the acquisition and installation of facility improvement measures, FIM, comprised of voltaic electric generating equipment and fuel cell systems, the project in an amount not to exceed $23,390,804, and whereas it has been determined that the amount required to be financed under the lease needs to be increased to an amount not to exceed $55,014,977 in order to increase the scope of FIM to include the photovoltaic electric generating equipment, fuel cell systems, as well as window and roof replacement, energy and computer management system improvements, HVAC improvements, water conservation measures, and other energy efficiency improvements. And, this is the last one, whereas the resolution needs to be amended in order to proceed with the project, increase the amount authorized to $55,014,977 and increase the scope of FIM, and the rest of it will be on record.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second. Thank you, Ms. Pearson. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Massiano. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Very, very good to be here. And last time I was here, I've been in front of the council many times on the energy performance contract previously. And as Ms. Kramer just read, we did have a $23 million approval to go forward. But I know we have two town council members that are new, Mr. Tedesco and Ms. Menke. So I'm going to give a brief recap, and then we'll try and hit some of the documents that are in front of you. So this project, which I call EPC 2.0, Energy Performance Contract 2.0, we did a performance contract back in 2014, so this would be the second one. The first one was very successful, and we, in 2023, endeavored down the road of trying to pursue a second energy performance contract. And so, you know, we were successful, and I'll be talking a little bit about the contract itself in a couple of minutes as we go through the presentation. The key players that have been involved in this project are Energia. They're a company that was hired. They serve as the owner's representative for the town and the schools on this project. Johnson Controls, Inc., Aaron Librio from Johnson Controls is here. He'll be speaking in a moment. They were hired as the energy service company that will do the proposed work. And then the third group that I do want to recognize is our EPC 2.0 working group that was appointed by the Cheshire Town Council. The members of that include Fiona Pearson from the Town Council, Chris Smith from the Cheshire Energy Commission, Tim White from the Board of Ed, as well as myself, Rich Clavette from the schools, Dan Bombero, Ray Harris from the town. And this project does involve school and town buildings. So with that as a backdrop, the request tonight, as was read partially, is to approve Energy Performance Contract 2.0 to go forward. We're looking specifically to approve $55 million worth of financing to cover the entire project. This project makes energy efficiency and infrastructure improvements across 16 school and town buildings. We'll get into the details of that a little bit as a summary level tonight. The important thing about this project is that the energy savings that we would receive from making these improvements, along with incentives, grants, and tax credits, would fully pay for the cost of the project over 15 years. So there is no cash or capital that's required up front. This will be a contract that over 15 years pays for itself. And then after the financing is complete, we'll continue to receive over the full contract $2.6 million of energy savings per year. That will continue until the equipment wears out. And it is an impressive list of improvements that we would make. Again, we'll go over that in a minute. The Town Council does have a very extensive package of information that was provided. You know, one of the key elements that was just completed in April by Johnson Controls and reviewed by Energia was the detailed energy audit report. That's a 60-page or so document. It outlines in detail all of the 17 energy conservation measures that we'll be doing under this project. There's also a couple of worksheet summaries, and I just provided this evening a letter from Energia confirming that they have done a review of all the project scope and that they recommend that we, as a town and school district, go forward with the proposal as completed by Johnson Controls. So that is the backdrop. I did want to highlight our current situation because that's why we're here in front of you tonight. There are some pressing components that are important. So the first is, and you'll see this as we go through some of the detail, but one portion of this project is to receive $15.7 million in school construction grants from the Department of Administrative Services. All the work that we're attempting to do that would be covered by that grant is eligible for grant reimbursement. We are having some technical issues with the Office of School Construction and Grant Administration, and we're trying to work through that. We do have a workaround that we'll explain that will enable us to begin work. So again, $15.7 million is quite valuable, and we do need that funding in order for this contract in its full scope of $55 million to work. Point number two, we have received approval for financing from Bank of America. We do have a rate lock. That rate lock expires on April 30th. So we're trying to close on the financing for the portion of work that we want to do now, because if we don't close by April 30th, that rate lock expires and rates, unfortunately, are currently a bit higher. And the impact of a higher rate, obviously, besides the fact that payment goes up, it reduces the amount of work that we can complete. And we would rather complete as much of the infrastructure work as we can. The third component and timeline issue is that part of the another portion of incentives that we can receive that we're eligible for are tax credits under the Inflation Reduction Act, which applies to solar arrays, and we are also looking to do fuel cells, so those tax credits apply to both components of work. The fuel cells themselves, they don't have a time sensitivity, but the solar arrays do, because there is a phase out of the tax credits if we don't complete a portion of the work by July 3rd. And there's another way we can extend this to December of 2027, but that is a pressure point. By getting 5% of the work completed by July enables us to extend the amount of time to complete the project, which we would rather take advantage. It's called a safe harbor provision. So that's one of the items that we're working together with Johnson Controls and Energia to make that happen. The resolutions that the town council previously approved, in August, were to go forward with $23 million worth of financing. And at the time, we knew that there was a larger project scope, so that was approved by the council. So we're really here to get the approval for the full project scope, even though we won't go forward with work until we know we've secured the grants for that portion of the project. So even though we're asking for the full approval, we will limit the work to the work that can actually be accomplished where we can get our credits and our grants. And that takes us kind of to where we are today. So, hopefully that's kind of clear that there are pressure points and timelines that we're trying to meet. We have all the documents getting ready for closing with Bank of America on April 30th. I don't think there'll be an issue with the documents. I know that we received a request for insurance today, which Mr. Jascott was able to complete. We are working closely with Mr. Kimball and Mr. Jascott, on the financing and on the contract signatories. I also want to let you know as the last point that we've worked with Attorney D'Onofrio on the legal components of the contract, and the resolutions that have been provided to the town council were provided by Glenn Rebecki, who's the attorney and bond counsel for the town of Cheshire. So with that, I will introduce Aaron, and he's going to walk through the PowerPoint presentation, but I'll pause for questions if you have any yet.
Questions from colleagues? Looks like we're good up until right now.
So I think the next document that Mr.
Yep.
Olibrio will present is the PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, good evening, thank you.
Good to see you again.
Thank you, Vin. Thanks. So I printed you a PowerPoint, I think it's 5 slides, summary level, and then there's some additional documentation that I know you were sent. So we'll start with the PowerPoint. On page 2 is a high-level overview of the $55 million project with the 17 measures. It has nice generation from solar under the NRES project, O&M savings, and then there's $7 million of IRA, which Vin talked about, which we refer to as the acronym ITC. Under the IRA, municipalities of 501c3s now qualify for tax direct pay incentives, and so that's where that rebate comes from. There's $2.3 million worth of annual energy savings, and as Vin alluded to, there's $16 million worth of state grants that are in that project. If you go to the third page, it's a bit of an eyesore, but this, in the X's, it demonstrates the work from the first column. ECMs and FIMs are pretty much the same thing, energy conservation measures or facility improvement measures, which is the first column. And then it's a brief description of the types of work that are done. And then across the top is all of the town and school buildings where the work will be implemented. If there is an X mark, that is in the larger project. There are pink-red highlight boxes. Those are not, we are not looking to fund to move those projects forward. The funding is everything on here with the exception of those, because we are waiting for assurances that those grant dollars are going to come in, and so that the project receives all of the benefits that are being proposed. There is a summary on the third page of what is being requested from Bank of America for the closing, which is $22.4 million, and it is reflective of those 13 measures that were on the previous page. Still a vast amount of robust savings associated with the project, and ITC, or direct pay subsidy, for the solar, as contemplated on the bottom. You'll see there's a 0 in the state grants, so we're not accounting for what is not in hand, so that we'll wait for a future schedule of additional dollars. As Vin indicated, the financing was selected under the RFP with Bank of America. They're doing what's called a master TELP, tax exempt lease purchase. In a master TELP, you can ask for additional funding at different periods of time. They're called schedules, and we're trying to maximize the rate lock that we have now. I think in the email you outlined what the bank gave as potential indicative rate increases and basis points should we delay the first phase of financing for the project. On the fifth page and final page is just demonstrating to you the vast amount of calculations that were submitted in the detailed energy audit in both the run-up for the original project and then the certified energy document that was created and turned over to your owner's rep, which is called the CEA. Sometimes people call it the DEA. And in there is calculations which follow the Department of Energy, the Federal Department of Energy's calculations to calculate energy savings, and so that it takes into account the equipment, the temperatures, the building type, and a whole host of stuff that I certainly don't completely understand, because we leave that up to the engineers on our team and the engineers from Energia that validated that. That's the brief presentation. I do want to just speak to a document that was replaced in your packet that was sent. It is the abbreviated project for funding. I believe you had one that was a buildup of about 33 million. The document that was being submitted when it was sent over was titled document number 4. So I gave you that as a print and handout. So it is the $22 million project. And because there's numerous more engineering and due diligence that needs to be done on the fuel cells, we've removed those from the funding at this point. There's no reason to have Cheshire borrow money for work that isn't going to be worked on for 4 to 6 months, and the due diligence that has to go on there. That original document that's being replaced had $10 million worth of fuel cell work. So that was replaced with additional HVAC scope. And so that's the difference in the funding request for next week's closing. I can cover any other documents that were submitted. I think Vin wanted to comment on one of them.
I did. So now I'm going to take us back to the long Excel sheet, because I think this is probably the key document that I want the council to understand. And I'll start with the bottom left hand, which is the summary of the project, before I explain some of the energy conservation measures that I want to highlight. So the annual energy savings is $2.3 million. We are taking into account that there will be maintenance and operation savings of $70,811, relatively small. We've got costs for engineering, general conditions, $6.3 million, architectural engineering fees, $2.4 million, and then $55 million of project cost. If you take that and start subtracting the lines below, estimated IRA is the tax credits, $4.885 million. You also have $15.76 million in school construction grants and $523,000 in rebates. So the way this works is we would be doing $55 million of infrastructure work. After you subtract the tax credits, grants, and rebates, the net cost of that will be $32 million. That's just the math. Okay, so those credits and the school construction grants, certainly a vital portion of what we would use to pay for those infrastructure improvements. We would receive the grants and the tax credits and the rebates in the early years of the project. The tax credits, for example, would be paid when the work is complete and commissioned, and that applies to the fuel cells and solar arrays. So those funds would come in relatively early, and the $32 million remaining is what we would be financing over the remainder of the payments, okay? So the little calculation on the bottom, what it's telling us is in 15.09 years, based on the $55 million total less the grants, we're financing $32 million, the energy improvements pay for themselves over that 15-year period, because we're getting $2.3 million per year. So, that part is pretty straightforward. Now what I want to do is just walk you through some of the energy conservation measures, because these are the improvements that will be made as part of this project. And the first one is window replacement. Now, what we're looking to do there is replace the windows at Doolittle Elementary School. Doolittle, after the new Barnum and the new Norton are open, we made certain priorities at Doolittle. One was replace the windows because we want to add full air conditioning in that building. And you want a weather-tight and efficient building if you're going to add air conditioning. So that is included in the overall scope, but it is excluded from this initial portion of work because it's not affordable under the initial portion of work. Number one, we need the school construction grant it would come with. And if you look all the way over on the far right, the payback on windows is 119 years because the cost of the windows versus the energy savings you receive just makes it a longer payback. The next three items are energy management systems, which would apply to school and town buildings. And if you look all the way over to the right, you'll see that those items pay themselves back in 7 years and 2.49 and 3.97 years. So some of the items that have short paybacks help fund those items that have the longer paybacks. Then items, item 3 is basically replacement of old rooftop units across school and town buildings. These are items that are dated. They are items that are in the capital budget, but if these get done through the energy performance contract, obviously they don't need to be funded through the capital budget. Again, that was an important criteria. That next one is big. That's the cooling addition for Doolittle. Again, it will be the only unair-conditioned building in the district. And you see, it's a $7 million project because of the way Doolittle is currently heated. We would have to add, all the components of ductwork, and again, depending on how we do the work. But you'll see that we didn't even calculate a payback on that because it's a pure add-on of cost. And that, even though in the overall scheme of the contract, it works, but that is, again, a priority that we made. And then the next, ECMs 5 through 8 are all HVAC. The next two and the last two that I really want to emphasize is ECM 12, which is fuel cells that will save us $1,091,000 a year, that have hard costs of $15.9 million, but we would have $2.9 million in tax credits with a 13-year payback. That's very good. We would install one at the wastewater treatment plant to replace the oil-fired units that are currently, being used at that facility. So this includes the cost of bringing in natural gas, from, through Eversource. And so that natural gas fuel cell will convert natural gas to electricity to help power that facility. And we'll add a second fuel cell at Cheshire High School as well. Again, converting natural gas, which already exists, to electricity. So those two combined save us $1 million a year. And then ECM 15, this is the big one for the schools. You'll see that it's $13.5 million in cost. But if you look over to the estimated grant column, $8 million in school construction grants are needed, and we would also receive $1.9 million in tax credits. So we would install solar arrays on 6 of our buildings with a 7-year payback, which is amazing. But again, it relies on grants and tax credits. So when we push all that stuff together, you've got a project that we make infrastructure improvements totaling $55 million. They pay back for themselves over 15 years. We don't have to carry it in the capital budget, and nor do we need to lay out any funds right now, because it's either being paid by grants or this financing through Bank of America. The only other thing that I want to mention that I didn't explain earlier is funding the $22 million of work now through the Bank of America closing means that we've got another $33 million or so worth of work that we would have to finance at the then current rate from Bank of America. Bank of America, these TELP financing rates are based on an index, so it's not like we can't understand what's happening with the index. And, certainly there's a chance rates will go up. We know they are up for May, but if we don't finance the remainder of the work for several months, then we may benefit from a lower rate. No way to know that, but I just wanted to put that out there, that the rate lock would only apply for the portion of financing, which is the 22 or so million Mr. Alibrio explained. So that's all we had to present tonight. We could go on for a day, but we won't. A lot of the work has been done, through the working group. And when we did meet with the working group 2 weeks ago, Ms. Pearson wasn't there, but Chris Smith and Tim White were there, and all the members of the working group, were unanimous in their support of putting these energy conservation measures forward to take it to the actual step of, getting approval here by the council and starting work.
Mr. Walsh, kick it off.
Thank you. Thanks. And it's a lot of numbers, trying to maneuver through them all. And the best thing is that you when you said that we don't have to bond this money, And a lot of these things would typically be on bonds, I would think. So does this affect, because we're doing it this way, our credit rating, or it has anything to do with any of that? Or is it, this is a completely separate deal and we're not putting any money out for this? It's basically going to be saving us a lot of money. I don't know how it would affect, because it's still a big number. I mean, it's $55 million.
I
So,
think they understand that it's paid with savings, from the efficiency of the energy, so they haven't paid a lot of attention to it.
okay.
But they do ask us, if we have any.
Yeah, I wasn't sure, because I mean, it's still a $55 million bill that has to be paid, but it's not being paid by the town necessarily. It's being paid by Johnson Control. So, okay, thank you.
I mean, it does, if you're taking items off the capital budget, it does reduce the future debt projection.
Yeah.
And, once you factor in the grants, rebates, and incentives, you have an increase in energy savings that is making the payments on the debt. So, yeah, it does increase the debt, but there's an offsetting credit for the payments that need to be made to the bank.
Well, I like to see windows off, so that's, windows my pet peeve.
Mr. Tedisco.
Thank you. So I'm working off the extended sheet.
Okay.
On the left-hand side, we have the 17 different items. Are those each an individual project in one building, or do some of them deal with several buildings? For example, we have energy efficient transformers, number 13. Is that for one building, or is that across a number of buildings?
Yeah, if you go back to that matrix, which was in the handout of the PowerPoint, if you will, the stapled one. Page 3 on the stapled version.
Right. Oh, okay.
So those measures that are listed as the first column to far left, ECMs, then the proposed measure description, if there is an X box, those measures are that measure is being done in those buildings.
So, Lou, this is one.
So for instance, if you look at ECM 2.1, energy management temperature setback, that is going in pretty much every building
Yeah,
with the
can you say,
exception
like-
of the Yellow House, WP, CA, Barnum, and Norton.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful. And when we say this is being paid through energy savings, so is that what I'm thinking is that instead of paying $100,000 for energy, at some point we'll only be paying $40,000 because of these improvements?
That is structurally correct. The budgets aren't reduced, the budgets are held at their levels, but the savings are guaranteed, and that goes to the calculations that were given, that were performed by us and handed over to Energia. So in your example of 100,000, if you have $40,000 of savings, I'm not sure how you did phase one, but some people just take that 100,000 line item and split it, 60 to the utility, 40 to debt service.
Okay, we're saving money, so what I'm thinking of, the town doesn't have to write a check for $100,000 for energy, whatever, we're gonna be writing a check for some amount, it's just less than before because of these savings.
The savings are dropped into, call it a bucket. That bucket pays for debt service. As Vin indicated, Windows have 112-year payback. The controls that we're just reviewing have 4-year. We blend those together. So everything in the project, all 17 ECMs, they fall into that bucket to pay debt service so that the town doesn't have to come out of pocket for the project.
Are these estimated savings, or are they guaranteed, these
They're
savings?
guaranteed in the contract. They have already been vetted by your consultant, and they're embedded into the contract and the contract amendment because, again, structurally, we had 2 measures that were approved last August, September, and now we're approving the whole project. And so those measures that were vetted in the detailed energy audit, or CEA, will go into the amendment of the contract.
And there's a $55 million loan that we're taking, there's $55 million in financing.
In financing, and part of that is because the state grants, when we do it, we're not borrowing for anything that has, we're borrowing for scopes of work with the state grant, but we're not accounting for it in that the project is still budget neutral. When the grants come, you have to borrow more money or come out of capital reserves because those grants are reimbursements. So you have to make the payment, demonstrate that the payments were made, submit to OGA or school construction, and then they send the checks back. Vin can talk about the experience that he's had where he's, 4 or 5 months lag, but they do. The bank in the financing has factored those into the cash flow, so essentially that those monies are flowing back in like a premium down payment, and you're no longer paying, extended amounts of interest on it.
So the bank expects to get repaid on a monthly basis for this over some period of time?
Yes, they do put a schedule together of payments.
But the money to pay the bank does not come from the town of Cheshire writing a check to the bank?
I'll comment first, but Cheshire will be writing a portion of the bank and then to the bank, and then those monies that come in that flow back from the government have a pay cycle. And so I can tell you structurally that those dollars will use solar. The $8 million worth of solar grants will start to flow when the solar gets installed and is completed. The payment for that is in basically year 3 of execution of the contract. And so they flow after, the payment schedule flows after the expectation that all of the money will be received by the town and put in escrow, if you will, to pay that debt service at whatever time in the schedule of payments, yes.
I'm just going to add a couple of points. In the simplest explanation, if we've got $100,000 worth of energy savings, basically you're using that $100,000 to pay the financing, right? So that's why it's budget neutral. We've reduced the amount we pay to Eversource as an example, but we have to pay the financing to the bank over the 15-year period of time.
So
And-
Cheshire's paying the bank on some basis, but we're actually saving money on energy usage.
Correct.
So.
Budget neutral.
And the savings are guaranteed.
Yeah, so let me speak about that. Because in our first energy performance contract, and energy performance contracts, by the way, they're allowed under Connecticut general statutes. There was, an act several years ago, I don't know the exact year, that enables energy performance contracting to work in Connecticut. The way the contract has to be written means that it has to be cash flow positive. Could be $1, but the contract has to show that the energy savings pay for the financing of the contract. That's how it works. In our first contract, which we're in year 10, the savings were guaranteed. Amoresco did that scope of work. It was about a $10 million scope of work. They did guarantee the savings. Amoresco has never written us a check because every year the savings have exceeded the guarantee by about $30,000. So over the first 10 years, we're about $300,000 to the good. So we made those energy and infrastructure improvements, and one of those improvements was to air condition Highland. Now, at the time we did that, it wasn't to air condition Highland, it was because Highland had all electric heat from 1971 when it was built. So, electricity back in the 70s was supposed to be practically free because of the nuclear plants that would be built, and it didn't work out that way. So we were paying very high electricity bills to heat Highland up until about 2015, when we replaced the electric heat with natural gas. We added rooftop units, and since we did that, we were able to heat and cool the building, and was still, net positive energy savings, about $65,000 a year at Highland. So because of that success, led us to recommend that we at least explore an energy performance contract, which will work for us. What's very different about this contract versus 2014 is that the school construction grant and the tax credits were not available back then. We had about $1 million worth of incentives from the utility. So these programs have been expanded since 2014, and we're trying to take advantage of what's available to the town.
How do the tax credits work? I mean, we're a town, we don't pay taxes as a town, right? We're tax exempt. Who gets the benefit of the tax credits, and how does that work into the overall financing.
Yeah, so, I mean, the benefit to the taxpayers is that you're making infrastructure improvements that you don't have to fund out of your capital budget. And then, once you complete the payments to Bank of America, that $2.3 million of energy savings should continue to be there. So the taxpayers will benefit from that savings after the contract is complete. For, again, nothing on this list lasts forever, but it should exceed the 15-year life. And that's, you know,
Right, but you're
that's-
talking about tax credits. When you say tax credits, you mean,
I'm sorry. Yeah, okay, so the tax credits, you're right. The law under the Inflation Reduction Act allows for municipalities to get paid cash in lieu of tax credits. And I don't know if there's some technical jargon you want to add to
No,
that.
the IRA, the Inflationary Reduction Act, allowed 501c3s and municipalities, non-tax-paying entities, to qualify under those for renewable programs. And they call it the direct pay, because you're not taking off of your tax obligation because you don't have one, you're taking a cash payment. And so the project does have qualifications, especially the solar for that ITC. And what happens is after it is turned on, then they're able to make, the town's able to make the application for that. You're making it actually upfront. We actually had a meeting with Clifton Larson, CLA, the auditors, with regards to that, because, you know, it's the responsibility of the town to help direct us to make sure that we receive those. So we had our initial kickoff meeting with them. We map out a schedule for them so that you can adhere to it. They look at the tax code and make the recommendations. And we did get some great positive feedback that you're going to receive 30% on the solar, but because it's a tax exempt financing, it's only 85% qualifying. So you got to take a 15% haircut on that financing, but it's better than some of the expectations we thought when the grants flow, because we thought that the value of the grants would reduce the direct pay, but that's not the case, so.
great, thank you.
Mr. Jinks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the 32 million over 15 years, and it's being paid for through savings. When is year one? When do we start the savings?
We have a construction schedule of 14 months, and I think the bank was working off 18 months for that first payment. And so, this is an excellent question, by the way, because stuff will be generating savings before that has been contemplated for you to start making your payments. Projects typically, the way the guarantee works is you have the debt obligation payments made. It's measured against those payments, the ongoing measurement. And if there is, from the guarantee perspective, a shortfall, it's already been realized. You've already.
Finance through savings. Whatever's
pretty much can tell you when that's not producing like it should, which can be dispatched, and just the way they're built, you kind of can zero in where those issues could be.
Okay. Yeah, this is exciting that we're kind of endeavoring this. I'm just hoping that it all comes together. Thank you.
Ms. Kramer?
Counselor Jinks took some of my questions for me, which is, no, it's okay, because it helps me form the other 10 I have. I wanted to speak to degradation of the equipment. I noticed that the financial spectrum keeps the savings the same throughout the 15 years, but with the equipment degrading, it's not going to produce as much electricity, so there won't be as much of a savings towards the end of the 15 years, I'm assuming. But it's guaranteed at that rate regardless.
Yeah, so on page 5 of the PowerPoint, there's several build-ups, if you will, of the savings. And so if you look at the solar on there, you'll see it starts out at 905, and then it just continues to go down. That's the degradation of the solar panels from a production level. The annual energy savings associated with the equipment is, if I could predict what electricity is going to do, I would have retired by now. And so there's a little bit of a discussion with regards to sharing what that rate will be based upon your baseline. So historically, through, you can look this up on the state of Connecticut's national website with regards to electricity, it increases roughly north of 4.23%, but it goes up and down. They change rates twice a year, and they go up and down. And so there's a factor of escalating electrical rates that are built into that first column, but the solar to the degradation, as you can see, does go down.
Because it's like energy costs go up and production goes down over time. So you're saying all of that is included, worked out, and
Yeah, just,
at no point will we be responsible for any financial obligation outside of what is already contractually guaranteed to us.
yeah, so there's a measurement and verification protocol that's in the contract, right? And so we're measuring it, we're providing to your owner's reps the validation, we're capturing the data, and so that there's a guaranteed level that supports that the town doesn't have to pay any of the debt service. They're not on the hook, if you will, right? And so if I just redirect you back to that line item, it goes from 905,000 and change down to 900. So that's the degradation of the equipment that's being factored into it, which has a warranty to match that degradation. And so roughly it's at 83% at 20 years of their original production. So that has been factored into the calculation, and it is being guaranteed by Johnson Controls, and so that the principal and interest payments on your debt service do not exceed the guarantee, if that makes a little bit clearer sense on that.
Sure.
That's a lot, I'm sorry.
Well, no, because we're trying to make predictions on energy prices and energy consumption 15 years from now using solar. So it's really abstract, and I'm just trying to get a handle on that projection, which I see here, and it's I'll look closer later. Another thing is, Jim also touched on the maintenance. We're seeing, I was elected 3 years ago, and we're looking at a lot of projects that were done prior to me being on council that have a maintenance factor that wasn't necessarily incorporated into a project when it was first started. So the maintenance on these, you're saying it's warranted, so if we have any catastrophic manufacturing failure, the pieces are covered. Who does the daily technical maintenance or the monthly technical maintenance? Is that done by the schools? Do we have to supply specific administrators or technicians to do that work?
It's done by a solar manufacturer that will be assigned for the maintenance.
And that's all part of the contract?
Correct.
Already? Yep. And when the contract is done, Cheshire takes over the equipment, or is this perpetually in a maintenance contract with?
No, Cheshire takes over the equipment, and then there's ongoing measurement and verification.
So all of this equipment will be ours in 15 years to maintain, to to work
It-
with, to keep
From
current?
From an ownership perspective, when it's delivered and installed on the site, you own it.
Ownership. I'm talking
and
about
any of-
maintenance, financial obligations to maintenance is what I'm curious
For
about.
anything new, okay, that isn't already in the systems, then there's a maintenance contract with it. When we talk about Doolittle, I'm not sure what the maintenance contract that the schools have now, but there's an added piece of an equipment. And so there will have to be an adjustment with regards to that because you will now have cooling, in that
An
building.
adjustment to the existing maintenance contract that the school runs.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the cost is incurred by the town, obviously.
Right. And so there's a yellow highlight on that you see. And so that will be factored into the final pro forma. Right now, the pro forma is very, very positive on your project, and it remains positive even at the 55 once there's a surety on those grants and stuff. And so that savings would end up being reflective in what's called a negative savings. And so if the maintenance contract that currently exists is going to go up by, say, $10,000, that'll be factored in so that the savings to pay debt service will be reduced by your increased costs. So it's done in the contract, and then the maintenance for that scenario is picked up by the school system.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Pearson?
I just want to thank you all for your work. I've been working with you for the past year, over a year now. And I will just say, I apologize for not being the last meeting. It's because I was with these folks. But I thank you for your responsiveness last summer when Tim White, I know we see a lot of Board of Ed members in the audience. Tim White brought to your attention what was happening with those grants, and you moved very quickly and came to us and were able to fast track those projects. And thank you for working right now through these little glitches that are being provided by our state government and offices, and look forward to seeing what you are able to produce here. Just to confirm, for those of I know we have new members here, right? Again, you will write a check if this is not met, if we don't meet these goals, these benchmarks. Well, then you write a check, and that's what has happened in the past. And I will also just say that I've watched Vin and Justin at Sustainable CT. I think Rich Ogurek at the Energy Commission and Chris Smith, we all sat and watched you actually promote these projects across the state. We're one of the few municipalities. We are deemed a community to look to in terms of how these kinds of contracts work. And so we were successful with that 2014 contract, and looking forward to seeing the savings from 2.0. And maybe 3.0 when it comes time to deal with those maintenance costs in 10 years. But just thank you for all your work on this.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Two quick ones. Go ahead, Mr. Messiano.
I just wanted to add one point to kind of reiterate what Ms. Pearson just said. And one of the things that when we spoke to Office of Grant Administration last week, Dr. Solon and I were referred to the Connecticut Green Bank, and we had a couple of pretty lengthy virtual meetings with Brian Garcia, who's the president and CEO of the Green Bank, Bert Hunter, and a couple of other people that are involved in the Green Bank. We sent them the sheet that we provided, that we reviewed with the 17 ECMs. And, not only are they supportive and trying to help us with the state, but I can't tell you how impressed they were by the town of Cheshire going after some very aggressive, projects to improve our utility and our infrastructure here in town. So Dr. Solon, reminded me that it is an important point and something for you to know as well. Sorry, Mr. Talbot, I know you had a couple of questions.
No, that's fine. What's your, crystal ball time, Mr. Masiana. What's your confidence that OGA will approve on 430?
Well,
It is the law.
Yeah, I know, we're on the
So,
right side of it,
I'm only
but-
stuck on the 4:30 date, because that is a
Yeah.
discussion with the commissioner. I don't know if, she will go back, because she is the commissioner, and obviously there's a department that reports to her, which is OGA. So I don't know that we'll get a definitive, not only do we need approval, but, we need to take the next step with our school construction grants and get this PCR review where they get all the design plans and make us go forward. So I'm optimistic that we'll have a good conversation with the commissioner, but I'm crossing my fingers that we'll have something in May.
Okay. And Attorney D'Onofrio is comfortable with moving forward with Bank of America on the 30th, even though we're on the right side of the law and hoping that something comes along in May?
Well, I didn't ask him that question specifically, but
Yeah.
because all the work we're doing does not involve any grant,
Right.
there is no risk for us of going out and doing work, counting on a grant that we don't get. I will tell you that Attorney D'Onofrio is very confident in the notwithstanding language that was passed, and that it needs to be acted upon, by OGA and DAS,
Okay.
that he did say. In the way only Attorney D'Onofrio can say something.
With regard, you talked about 5% of some of the work being done early July. Are we confident that we're going to meet those targets for the projects that we are starting?
Yeah, that was the CLA conversation that we're having. And so when we look at our schedule, meeting the 5% is a 5% payment in order of materials shipped to the site. And then there's some other things structurally for that ITC compliance. And so when we look at closing next week, we're ahead, getting materials there, having a signed contract. These are all just the elements that we reviewed with your tax advisor.
Thank you. Anyone else? Last chance.
I have one quick budget question.
Sure.
This is more for the budget gurus on the panel. The capital improvements and then the energy savings, since it's split between BOE and town, where do we see this in the budget? Not only the savings, but the
Still capital.
Yeah.
town capital.
That's all the same thing.
So the schools aren't going to be responsible for the electricity costs? The town covers that with the money
Right,
that comes in?
that's revenue neutral, so the numbers that are in the budget for the utility costs remain the same. Our actual costs are down from that, but the savings are being applied back to debt service to pay off the capital.
But this line item does not go into debt service. It phantoms in the energy part of the budget because it's being paid directly from the revenue there. Okay.
I'll just add, the way we're doing it with the current contract that we're in, there is a split. So the work that was done that benefits the town, that's carried in the town's budget. The work that benefits the schools is carried in the school's budget. So again, it should be budget neutral on both the board and the town side. Energy savings pays for the lease payments. And I forget the percentage split, maybe Mr. Jascott remembers. It's something like 80-20 though, because 80% of the work was dedicated to schools.
Okay. It's good to know that breakdown, too.
Anything else, colleagues?
Are we voting on something tonight?
We are.
And specifically, what are we voting
We can,
What was the resolution again?
excuse me, we can do the resolution again, but what,
The vote is to approve the full 55 million, to amend the original resolution to bring
From
it up
the-
to the $55 million total, so that we don't have to come back to the council to approve the financing. However, Mr. Kimball, as town manager, he has to execute the documents, he has to provide notice to proceed as work is being, presented for approval. So that is, once the council approves it, then it's on the town manager to execute against that approval.
Bringing it up to 55 million, so. We're not voting on a brand-new 55 million tonight?
No,
So what is the amount that we're bringing?
it's
From-
30,
From 23 million to
Yeah.
55 million.
32.
I mean, some of us are new to this, and we've seen
Yeah.
these things tonight in front of us, the first time we've had them to look at. It's
Yes.
a big vote. Sean, let me ask you this, Sean, can I ask you, do you think this is a good thing for us to be doing?
Yeah, I do. You know, as Vince said, and actually was referenced earlier when the question came up about any potential concerns on bond rating or anything else. I would point out actually a little bit on the contrary. When we had our bond rating presentation, one of the things the rating analysts were pleased to see was the amount of debt service in our projections that we had taken off of the future schedules because of some of the energy performance contracting proposals being done. If you remember last fall, the council eliminated a number of future year capital projects because we were going to be able to fund them through this program, so it certainly helps. And again, I think that we've had good luck with the 2014 performance contract, and so it's been a positive, and I do think, echoing I think what Fiona said before, you know, Cheshire's a little bit of a leader in this space, and Finn and I were on a presentation to CCM a couple weeks ago explaining our experience here in the town together, so yeah, it's certainly something I endorse.
And most of the $55 million will be paid for not through Cheshire taxpayer funds, but through the other methods that we've been talking about tonight.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, it's really all paid for by whether it's the grants or the savings that's realized from the performance contract itself.
All right.
All good, colleagues? Call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously by those present. Thank you both for being here, and I know you're happy that we were able to squeeze this in so
Thank you
can
very much for
get
you know,
stuff going.
the
Yeah.
vote and for, again, getting us in tonight. Much appreciated, and obviously we'll keep you posted, certainly, either directly or through Mr. Kimball.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Good to see you again. Which brings us to item 6, proposed fiscal year 26-27 operating budget. I will turn the meeting over to our budget chair, Ms. Pearson.
All right, and we were going to just switch the public comment, just to provide individuals in the audience an opportunity to speak, should they wish to speak, and then we'll engage in our general budget deliberations. So if there is anyone in the audience who would care to speak, and we did receive comments that I will summarize from our emails as well. If you could just state your name and address, thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Mike Papa, 56 Bell Ridge Road. I am also the technology director for Cheshire Public Schools for the last 29 years. So I just wanted to shed a little light on some of the budget impact regarding technology in our schools. So Superintendent Solon said previously that it'll impact our life cycle of PCs. We tried to keep it 5 to 6. We have some that are at 6 years old now. If we don't replace those, they'll be 7-year-old, 7-year-old machines next year. Not the end of the world. We'll get by, but it is an impact, and we've done a really good job of trying to stay at that age for our computers. So another thing that I wasn't sure if everyone was aware of. So in lieu of any additional funding, the Chromebooks that we'll be using in the new schools are going to be 7-year-old Chromebooks. There's no new technology being provided in the new schools other than smartboards and Chromebook carts. So PCs for that school, I purchased those out of this year's operating budget, almost all of my operating budget. Copiers and printers, for instance, not included, we'll be purchasing those as well. So that'll come out of next year's operating budget. So we're also reducing the total number of iPads that we have by 160, which would impact kindergarten is now going to have a shared cart of iPads instead of technology resources in each of those rooms. Once again, not the end of the world, just trying to demonstrate that I'm squeezing everything I possibly can out of what I've got. I've shaken out the couch cushions and smashed every piggy bank that I could find in my department. So So I simply wanted to provide just some additional information on how we're currently funding technology, how we're getting by with the funding we have, and it's not going to be the end of the world. But I don't want to slip. We had a case like 5 or 6 years ago where we really kind of slipped behind due to some bad budget years. And we do provide great technology services. Our technology is current. And I really don't want it to be reduced any further. But don't be surprised when you go to the new schools if you're going to see a copier there that's 8, 9 years old, and why aren't these all new? And why are the kids using devices that are 7, 8 years old, that are the ones that the high school seniors turned in this year that we refurbished to squeeze a couple of years out? So I know that those haven't been included in the new school building project because they're not reimbursable, but it'd be great to get some of this stuff possibly out of that project if there were to be extra funds, just to minimize the impact going forward. I just don't want to slip any, fall any further behind. So I've been doing this job for 29 years. I've never come here to speak about funding. I've always done the best with whatever you've given me, and we do a fantastic job. But yeah, I felt it incumbent upon me this year to at least provide some additional clarity, especially when it comes to the new school. So I thank you for your time, and look forward to your deliberations going forward into next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mappa.
Good evening. My name is Matt Kohlauer, 49 Summerhill Court, and I'm speaking tonight as a member of the public, but as you know, I'm also a member of the Board of Education. I have 3 children at Doolittle this year. I want to be upfront about something. When the board approved its budget back in January, I was the only no vote, as you may well remember, and I think it's important to explain why. At the time, 2 of my biggest concerns were transportation and our stopgap insurance policy. On transportation, I've spent a lot of time looking at the cost of underutilized buses and whether there's a smarter way to run that system, and I still believe there's work to be done there, and I've had productive conversations with Dr. Solon and his staff about it. But the reality is that with the transition to the new schools and families still figuring out routes and patterns, that work is not going to have an impact on this year's budget. My other major concern was the very high cost of our stopgap insurance policy. That policy is costing several $1 million, and we've been losing on average roughly $500,000 a year. I understand the town council announced just before the election the formation of an insurance advisory group, but from where I sit, any findings that may eventually produce are not going to happen in time to meaningfully impact the town's budgets. So I want to be clear that my no vote in January was not a vote against supporting our schools. It was a vote driven by specific concerns around major cost drivers, especially transportation and the stopgap insurance policy. I believed then, and I still believe now, that those are areas that deserve hard scrutiny. But after continuing to dig through this budget in detail, I have also come to believe that those issues are not going to be resolved in a way that creates meaningful relief for this year's budget. I've continued to go through the BOE budget in painstaking detail, line by line, because honestly, that kind of work aligns with my professional background, and I actually kind of enjoy it. In my career, evaluating budgets and understanding where real pressures are is a big part of what I do. I'm familiar with every line item of the BOE budget. And what has changed for me is not my commitment to scrutiny. What has changed is the information. As town council deliberations have continued, the town manager recommended a budget with school reductions, and more information comes in about estimated costs for the new schools. It has become clear to me that there's no real extra room left in the Board of Education budget without seriously affecting students. We've already seen costs come in above estimate, including cleaning costs, and we've seen how non-controllable expenses have developed during this current school year, such as special education transportation, and even snow removal thanks to our recent blizzard. Those are real pressures, and eventually they land on kids. Dr. Solon has stated that if the town manager's recommended budget is passed with further Board of Ed cuts, we may not be able to have middle school sports, and that should concern everybody. In a town that proudly says people move here for the school system, middle school sports are not some extra luxury. They are part of education. They teach teamwork, discipline, hard work, and camaraderie. They help students feel connected, and they help build the foundation for the success we celebrate as a town when our high school teams compete and win. I also think we need to say plainly that the state continues to pile on mandates and expectations while failing to keep its support in line with the actual cost of educating students. The cost of education keeps going up. The cost of special education keeps going up. The compliance burden keeps going up, but state support has been essentially flat for decades, even as local school districts are asked to do more and more. That is cost shifting, plain and simple, and towns like Cheshire are left making up the difference. The state has gotten very comfortable demanding more from local school districts without paying its fair share of the bill. And when that happens, the burden does not disappear. It gets pushed onto towns, onto local taxpayers, and ultimately onto students. And that's exactly the kind of cost shifting our local leaders like you should be fighting against. So I would urge the members of the town council and our town management to use your relationships and your access to our state delegation to push back. Push the state to stop handing down mandates without providing support that reflects the real cost of meeting them. If Hartford wants towns to do more, Hartford should help pay for more. After doing the work and studying the numbers, I believe the town council should pass the full Board of Education budget, and if there's room to strengthen it, I would support that too. Our students deserve that investment, and Cheshire's value on education should be reflected in this budget. And I hope you don't consider me rude, and with no disrespect intended, I need to leave immediately to pick up a daughter at soccer practice, a doctor that incidentally will be at Dodd next year and has been talking about and excited to play middle school sports since she was in 3rd grade. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kohlhauer. And just to let you know, the Insurance Advisory Working Group did report back to us last meeting, I believe it was, and so you can find those results online, but it's looking like we're running pretty well. We're going to be meeting with brokers, I believe. That's kind of the next step. But for the most part, they were impressed with some of the choices. So we'll keep looking for savings, though. Thank you. Anyone else from the general public? All right, I just have a few emails that we have received since our last meeting, so I will just read off the names and the summary of comment. Heather and Eric Luna wrote in support of the current BOE budget and concern about the BOE budget cuts. Tricia Rowland wrote that perhaps we should be creative and look at services like Bay State Textile School programs to raise revenue. Rishma Lee wrote in support of funding for the BOE budget. Megan Jones wrote to object to the proposed elimination of middle school and freshman athletic programs. Eric Hoyas Ramir wrote in support of increased funding for Cheshire Public Schools. Greg Murdy wrote against education being taxed by the government and after-school activities and sports being funded from taxpayer money. Aaron Burton wrote in support of increased BOE budget, support for middle school sports. John Runty wrote with concern about the budget cuts, and he objected to proposed cuts to sports and increase in class sizes. Nicole Jaraka wrote with concern about the proposed BOE budget cuts. Deanne Moore wrote with concern about the proposed BOE budget cuts and objection to proposed cuts to sports and increase in class sizes. Christian, no last name, concern about proposed BOE budget cuts and objection to proposed cuts to sports. Lisa Zanka wrote with concern to the proposed BOE budget cuts, and the ABA paraeducators at Highland Elementary School wrote collectively to express their concern about proposed BOE budget cuts and ask for support for the protection of special education staffing and programming. So thank you to all of those folks. Your letters are on our public record and will be available there for people who would like to read them in full. And so with that, I'm going to turn over the meeting to Town Manager Sean Kimball with oh, I'm sorry. One more public comment.
Sorry. I didn't realize you had a shorter list to read off of it. So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And as you know, I am on the Board of Education, but I'm here as an individual just to speak in support of, I recognize that there's a 3-minute cutoff, so I'm going to be really quick. So, for the record,
sorry,
Sam Rosenberg.
Go ahead, yeah, name and address.
106 Stonebridge Court, 3302, if you should know my apartment number also. I want to start by saying something really simple but important. This budget is not a wish list. It's a responsible plan that reflects the real cost of running a high-performing school system in 2026 and beyond. Cheshire has long been proud of its schools. Families move here because of them. And to quote a certain superintendent. They don't come here for the nightlife. Our community identity is shaped by them, and our students succeed because of them. But that success does not happen by accident. It happens because we deliberately make deliberate choices to invest in our children, our educators, and our future. Tonight you're being asked to, next week you're being asked to approve a budget increase. And I understand that any increase is difficult. Everyone is feeling the impact of rising costs, families, seniors, small business owners, and taxpayers. And I don't take that lightly. However, we need to be honest about what is driving this budget. The largest increases are not due to extras or unnecessary spending. They are driven by contractual salary and benefit obligations, special education services, and out-of-district placements, transportation costs, utilities, operational inflation, growing enrollment, and student needs. These are not optional expenses. They're legal, ethical, and educational responsibilities. And we should also recognize a difficult reality. As Mr. Kohlauer had mentioned earlier, the state continues to impose mandates on districts like ours, especially in special education, without fully funding them. Cheshire is required to meet these needs regardless of whether the state increases its reimbursement. That means local taxpayers end up carrying more and more of the burden each year. So the question before us is not simply, do we want to spend more? The real question is, do we want to maintain the level of education and services that Cheshire families expect and that our students deserve? Because of this budget, if this budget is not supported, the consequences will be real. It will mean larger class sizes. It will mean fewer intervention supports. It will mean less help for students who are struggling academically, socially, or emotionally. It will mean fewer elective offerings, fewer enrichment opportunities, and fewer resources for teachers. And it will mean cutting staff who provide direct services to children every day. And it will mean we are asking our educators to do more with less again, at a time when the demands on schools have never been greater. We all want fiscal responsibility, but fiscal responsibility does not mean cutting until we harm our core services. It means making smart investments that protect what matters most. And education is not a line item, it is the foundation of this town. When we invest in our schools, we invest in a strong workforce, a safe and healthy community, higher property values, strong local businesses, and most importantly, the future of Cheshire. I also want to highlight that this district has a track record of careful planning and responsible budgeting. The Board of Education has worked hard to bring forward a proposal that is reasonable, strategic, and aligned with actual needs and not wants. This budget also comes at a pivotal time for Cheshire. We are preparing to open 2 new elementary schools in the fall. This is a major milestone for our town, and it reflects our long-term commitment to modern facilities and strong learning environments. But opening new schools also requires staffing, operational planning, and maintaining high-quality programming across all buildings, and just not new ones. If we cut now, we risk undermining the very progress we have worked so hard to achieve. And tonight, I ask you to think beyond the numbers. Think about the students who walk into the classrooms next year. Think about the kindergartner learning to read. Think about the middle schooler struggling with anxiety, the high school student preparing for college or career. And think about the special education student whose success depends on specialized services that we are legally required to provide. Those children are not abstract. They are our neighbors. They're our families. They are Cheshire. And they are counting on the adults in this room to make a decision that reflects our values. Supporting the budget is not about politics. It's about priorities. It's about whether Cheshire continues to be a community where we do what is right for kids. I urge the town council to support the Cheshire Public Schools budget increase, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rosenberg.
Hi, my name is Heather Fitzgerald. I'm at 168 Nob Road. I'm also speaking as an individual and not on behalf of the board, but I am a member of the Board of Education. I'll be brief. I echo Matt and Sam's comments. I just want to say I support the Board of Education budget as originally proposed prior to the town manager's recommended $300,000 reduction. Cheshire has consistently achieved strong student outcomes while operating one of the lowest per pupil expenditures in the state, something our community can be proud of. At the same time, we must recognize that this level of efficiency is not sustainable indefinitely. A reduction of $300,000 represents real impacts on our students, including potential changes to student-facing opportunities, such as school athletics and other programs that are integral to a well-rounded education. Our students, staff, and administrators do exceptional work every day under increasingly complex demands. Supporting them is essential to maintaining the quality of our education, our community expects and deeply values. I also ask that our Board of Education, Town Council, and state legislators continue to advocate for Cheshire to receive its fair share of funding through the Education Cost Sharing Grant, the state's primary vehicle for supporting public education. Ensuring that the state meets its obligation is critical to sustaining the quality of our schools without placing an undue burden on local taxpayers. Finally, I want to thank you, the Town Council, for taking on this difficult and unenviable task of building a town budget. These decisions are not easy. I appreciate your time, care, and commitment to serving Cheshire. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fitzgerald. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak? Thank you. And thank you to all who have presented your perspectives, very important at this time. And so now I will turn this again to Town Manager Sean Kimball to present the mill rate calculator and any adjustments that we may have made in the interim since our last meeting.
Sure. So, yeah, a little harder to see in this room, I know, than downstairs, so I apologize. Let me know if you need me to zoom in at any point. But here's our friendly neighborhood mill rate worksheet that we all know and love. We have, since our last meeting, I'll just give you a few updates and a few updates from the version that we sent around. If you recall in our last workshop, I was plugging in some of the debt service adjustments to the general government line, just so you know, those are now down here where they should be in debt service so that they show up in the right spot in our final appropriations. But you'll recall the updated debt service numbers here in green from our bond sale and the use of bond premium amortized over 20 years. We'll get to the next item here in a second, which we talked about, but I'll start back up at the top. We talked about the bulky waste drop-off, which was in, as of right now, at $50,000. I slightly changed the numbers. We had plugged $75,000 for the hydrant maintenance position, offsetting the $75,000 that's in the budget request. The actual salary for that position at a kind of a step one of a fire inspector rate is $63,700. So my recommendation would be that we reduce that same contracted amount to by $65,000 instead of $75,000. That would leave $10,000, which would be critical for tools, parts, replacement items in the operating budget to supplement, obviously supplemented by the capital money that we approved last year. And then we talked about the Trinity Ambulance savings that we got from the revenue sharing last meeting. I'll get to this next list that I plugged in here. Councilor Jinks had sent a list of some ideas that he wanted to talk about tonight. I've put them in here in a total. We can go through each of those in probably a little bit. But for now, this total cuts the general government side of the budget by about $313,000 as listed on the screen. Again, we'll come right back to that. The only other adjustment on the expenditure side now, so the Board of Education, no adjustment from what's been recommended. And then use of additional debt service reserve per the schedule. This is what we talked about at the end of our last meeting. I have another spreadsheet I'd like to pull up before we kind of go any further, just to kind of explain that a little more. You're familiar, and this is in our online budget book as well. This is the use of debt service reserves, which we pulled up at the last meeting, kind of scheduled over the next 10 years going forward down here. But the new column, and again, I know, apologize for the kind of distance here, but the new column here in orange is what we talked about. We have $6.3 million in debt service reserve. The plan, we've front-loaded and used that in past years when needed. Otherwise, we amortize the bond premium we receive. Typically, most of that money is from bond premium over 20 years. As we talked about, we have this kind of year and a half, 2 years of bridging that we need to do until we get the added revenue post-credit enhancement agreement from the Stonebridge properties. So I've added a column here in the far right, just as a point of reference. This is sort of a post-CEA TIF district tax revenues available. These are not, necessarily, these numbers are obviously subject to some change, but there are best estimates, as I talked about, I think at my very first budget presentation back on March 10th. This is fiscal '27. We know here, this blank, this zero, we aren't getting any additional money because the obligation is not satisfied yet. But based on projections and the growth and the likely development as of this coming October 1st for Stonebridge, we anticipate that about half of the total additional 75% revenues that we'll be getting will be received in fiscal '28, which actually a little less than half. It remains about $1.1 million that we would be having outside of the CEA once the obligation's settled. So this is fiscal '28, and then this is fiscal '29 and beyond. I've just kind of increased those by 2%, assuming some level of typical growth you'd have there. Just showing that that's sort of the gap that we're trying to fill until we're able to. And again, remember, that takes an action of the town council to sweep those funds from the TIF district so long as it still exists the way it is. What I would recommend, worked with Jim Jascott here, is last meeting I think we talked about $1 million out of the debt service reserve in the first year. We then discussed a little bit more. I had a conversation with, first, when Jim and I met about this, we had a scenario where we thought we could do 1.25 million pretty comfortably. What I'm showing here going forward, these next 5 years, kind of feathering it in, tapering it off a little bit as that other revenue comes in. These highlighted cells total $3.8 million of that 6.3. We've shown future years, again, this is subject to some change. We were kind of showing that you could restore that money, and there's no specific need to. We will also have other funds coming into this as we issue more bonds in the future, get more bond premium, or have other settlements or one-time revenues. The council has often in the past, as we may talk about here in a minute, taken one-time revenues and put them into debt service so that they can be used out over future years to mitigate our debt increases. Shown here, and again, these are not written in stone, but just that you could kind of reverse that trend and kind of add back to debt service reserve in future years when you had the ability to do so. We were using numbers here that this column L, sorry, kind of hard to see, that would kind of just smooth the year-over-year increase in debt service. It's worth remembering, especially for anyone here kind of seeing this maybe for the first time, all of this is subject to a lot of change. The other lever the council has is this very first column, gross debt service. Other than fiscal '27 and then our pretty solid projections for '28, because we just issued debt last month, these future years are also very heavily influenced by the additional capital projects we add to the budget. We'll be doing that in the next couple of months this summer when we talk about the next round of capital projects. So just know that that first number doesn't also have to increase, 500,000 or $1 million each year. In a perfect world, and again, you also have debt falling off, that's why it's not increasing quite that level. But less projects we approve, if we're able to do so, the energy performance contract was one we talked about earlier, all feathers into those projections. And so that's just another sort of unknown, if you will, in the first column, but also one that's within the council's control to limit how much additional debt we add on. So all of this assumes it is being added on in the projections you have here. So, sorry, that was kind of a lot there, but the bottom line is 1.25 we were comfortable with coming out of debt service reserve. Had a further conversation with both Peter and Fiona earlier today that the hearing we had earlier today to sell the $250,000 property at North Brooksvale, I would recommend, and we think we talked about it at the last meeting, putting that into debt service reserve. And Peter, I think your suggestion was just going ahead and applying that to the first year in this otherwise understandably difficult budget year. That's why this number is 1.5 million. Again, all of that is subject to the council's decisions and direction tonight. Any questions on this spreadsheet before I just jump back and always pull it back up again, but kind of a brief catch-up overview from last week's conversation. All right, so if I go back to our reserve, that's why you see 1.5 in this cell here, there. That is, again, reducing net. It's not being taken as revenue. This is the way we've always handled debt services. Those are offsetting resources that bring our net debt down. That's actually what we budget each year. So this brings our debt service, combined with those that we've already talked about, down by 1.6 million. And just a reminder on our trustee calculator at the bottom, reflecting all the adjustments made, these are your final appropriation numbers, the way they stand right now. So that brings our debt service increase from 11.5 million last year to 12.5 million this year. Still an increase of $1 million, but much better, of course, than the 2.6 million we were grappling with 22% when I first presented the budget. So I skipped over a few other revenue adjustments. Last meeting, we talked about these first two. The department revenues, we spent a lot of time going through department revenues and talking about whether we could increase those a little bit further. Some of the discussion for tonight involve the counts, and this kind of, again, ties into, I think, some of the questions that Jim had asked me in his email, was the use of, as we did last year, Elam Park gift funds for police and fire. As a reminder, we get, and I just talked to Elam Park CEO just last week, we are next month receiving another $430,000 from them. That's divided in half between the two police and fire gift accounts historically. Last year, we used $75,000 from each to help balance a very difficult budget. This proposal would be to lessen that. I counted on none of that in my budget, so this is all new revenue, if you will. We would be counting on $50,000 from that. So the department gift accounts would receive $165,000 instead of $215,000. So that's the $100,000 you see here. Yep.
Have the police or fire mentioned what they had plans for the gift account, and if they were planning on using more of it than what we're taking away, or we don't know?
Not in specifics. I mean, it changes a little bit year to year. I mean, it has been, I mean, look, we know the police especially, these funds are utilized for, additional specialty trainings, conferences, other things that maybe otherwise couldn't be funded in the regular budget. But it's also used for certain outfitting of vehicles or other things that maybe we don't,
So nothing specific was...
Nothing specific presented, that, there's always a little bit of room. And right now, the current balances of both accounts is still about $70,000 from last year's appropriation. So, there's always a little bit of year to year. We don't, this has always been ever since I've started here, this has been one of those things that we kind of grapple with how to account for the gift account money, because you don't want to over count on it for operating expenses that if it were to go away, you're just going to have to bring all of those in. But it's also not to say they're all extraneous, because a lot of, naturally over difficult budget years, we've had times where the fire department has had to utilize gift account money to get things you might otherwise expect the operating budget has. It just either didn't have, or, we've been asked to cut, and we're not buying, all of our hoses or anything like that on there, but I'm sure we've bought some of them to supplement.
Well, one of the things with the fire department, with this new position as the fire hydrant maintainer, they may need a car, they may need some equipment that $10,000 won't cut it. And so hopefully they will use some of that money to make sure that that's outfitted. And we have no idea how much it's going to cost to actually replace or repair any of these,
So once the funds come in, typically the chiefs will come in with a proposed budget. Again, we're expecting to have those checks in probably either late May, probably the June council meeting will come for the acceptance and appropriation. And at that time, we ask the chiefs to present how they're planning to spend the money.
Okay.
But certainly that'll be front of mind as we, first of all, if we end up with this number, they're budgeting on what they'd use the $165,000 for, and then they can.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we weren't taking away from something that they already had planned, and now they're going to have to scramble, but that's fine. Thank you.
Sure. And then, again, I don't know if you want to talk about any of these, Fiona. I know some of these are conversations we had a little bit earlier this week, but I was asked to put on the list as a possibility, education cost sharing assumed increase. Again, this is still the topic of discussion at the state level. I think there's hope that we'll be getting around $200,000 or potentially $250,000 of additional funding. From what I understand, that's sort of a one-year stopgap measure with plans by the state to make a full formulaic adjustment to ECS going forward. All of this remains to be seen, of course, and will kind of changes by the day and week, it seems. But it does seem to be a lot of movement around some sort of increase to towns this year. We won't know that before our budget deadline, so I think we have to make some sort of assumption, either anywhere from zero to some number. I think that number is probably in the $250,000 range. But we put that on, again, I guess, as a sort of placeholder for now. It's in the number, so know that when we look at the mill rate. And then two of our larger revenue items, talking a little more with our finance director for both building department and investment income. Again, a lot of these are the same conversation we had last week. They're a little bit of guesses, looking back at the numbers, and Jim's always pretty conservative, so if he tells me it's something we can look at, I tend to listen. He thinks we can probably justify going up 100,000 in both of those, given where rates are with investment income and given some of the developments we know in the pipeline, including Elam Park. But again, all of that, as we talked about last year, we don't have a crystal ball for exactly what those numbers will be. But I also know we're trying to get to a good mill rate that balances all the needs and programs we're trying to support. So I guess with that, I'll go back. I don't think I
Are
left
there any
anything else out.
questions? Councilor Jenks?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can we just stop on the ECS, the additional ECS real quick? I just want to clarify. So we have to make a decision now, unfortunately, before the end of, before the state kind of decides what we're going to get. So the mill rate's going to be set before we know what the full funding is going to be, like, 10 days later, which is, unfortunately the way it is. So there is, and I mean, I've heard some rumblings, some other people have heard some rumblings that it could potentially be significantly more than this number, but there isn't anything, once we know what the number is, and even once we get the number, there isn't anything we can do to modify the budget that we pass next week. That's correct, right? There is, or not.
I think it's, I would say yes. I mean, technically, you can amend the budget, you can have a public hearing, and you can amend the budget mid-year. It's a process we really try not to do, certainly in the first 6 months of a fiscal year. There's just a lot you don't know at the early months of the budget. So I wouldn't recommend it, but we've amended budgets in the past. I mean, Jim, I don't know if there's anything more you want to add on that?
Yeah, I guess my only concern is if there's applications for some of the elderly and things like that, that might depend on some advance notice on mill rate. Like, I don't know if we're anticipating changing the mill rate down the road.
Yeah, so I would say, well, that's a great point. You can't really change the mill rate based on it, because that's been established and tax bills have gone out. I thought if you were saying we could go back and adjust an operating budget number, you can. I mean, you're the appropriating authority. You can amend the budget. You can reduce budgets mid-year. You can amend, but just subject to a public hearing. But again, it's not a great practice.
Right. If it turns out, that hell freezes over and we get another $1 million, then, but we can't really do anything about that until the next fiscal year.
I mean, that's what the same position most towns find themselves in. And exactly. So what some towns would do then is say, well, that's great if you received excess. You can put it towards a one-time item or capital funding so you don't have to bond as much. That helps you longer term. That's typically the path they would do instead of maybe going back and amending operating budgets for spending more. That's just pretty, it's just less common. That's all.
Yeah, okay.
But I didn't want to say it's technically impossible. It is technically possible.
Still learning. So if educational cost sharing gave us $1 million extra that we didn't expect, we couldn't just, if it's educational money, we couldn't just give it to the school system? We couldn't just give it to the Board of Education to spend?
I mean, you would have to amend their budget. You'd have to take an action to increase their, but you could.
And I'm not saying that if the budget was cut from what was proposed by $500,000, I'm making these numbers up now, but then you got more money than you expected. It would seem to me, just as a practical matter, that you should be able to replace that money.
Sit up here, Jim.
Yeah, okay. So you could appropriate that $1 million to the general fund and increase the Board of Education budget. It would be, neutral from a mill rate perspective. Yeah, so there's absolutely nothing wrong. And we've done that, I think, from time to time over the years for similar reasons.
Yeah, we also we had to do that when we appropriated money from ARPA towards the Board of Ed budget or when we did it for the medical insurance fund before. So it's kind of a little different, but it's similar.
I was more concerned about the mill rate, that once we adopt a mill rate, kind of sets a lot of things in motion, including, preparation of tax bills and applications for some of the...
None of that would change. That's been set, you've got that for you. But now you've got this extra, somebody like getting a gift.
Exactly.
You can go on a vacation you didn't expect to go on, or something like that, right?
But the shame of it is the timing. though.
But I don't see why,
Well, the shame of it is that,
if it happened.
I mean, it'd be nice to get the extra money, of course, but the shame of it is the timing, because we're collecting more tax revenue from the public for the next year that we wouldn't otherwise need to. That's the problem.
Sure, but that's happening anyway. Once you set the budget, that's all happening. But if you did cut the Board of Ed or any other agency in some amount, and you did have more money, you could replace, I don't see why you couldn't replace that easily.
Yeah, again, you can't, there's no reason you can't. The only thing I would point out and remind us, though, is we're also using $2 million of our general fund balance to balance this budget. So, again, from a financial standpoint, I would depend, I mean, and we're speculating about this $1 million if it were to show up, but, you know, you'd have to look at the full picture and decide, because that 2 million, we're gonna have to make up sitting here next year to fill that cliff. Because we're using 2 million of surplus, so if we don't generate over 2 million of surplus, and otherwise that's where that revenue would go, then we're gonna have to find that and increase taxes further the following year.
All right, so the $1 million that I've made up could just go back into our fund balance, I guess, correct?
That's what it would do if you did nothing else.
Right, but
All right, okay.
Any other questions on that?
Lou, did you want to ask the question about the investment income?
There was talk about increasing our estimate of what the investment income
Which is
would be. Right.
line number 6.
And we were, okay. And I was told that was essentially interest income. That's interest. Well, just, why would we assume that we're gonna have $100,000 more interest income than we're otherwise thinking?
Yeah, Louis, there's, the only thing, and that was partly me, but I would say when we do those projections, we're pretty conservative with just about all the variables that go into that process. And I think Sean mentioned that rates have stabilized, if anything, maybe gone up a little bit recently. So this is probably one of the more difficult ones to hit a bullseye on from year to year. But generally, we've been on the favorable side of that, with the exception of this past year, because the rates did significantly decrease. I think, almost a whole 100 basis points from what we had used in our projections, and there's no way we could have predicted that. But I want to say, I felt pretty comfortable with a $100,000 increase based on how much money we've got, invested.
Said a little bit differently then.
Yeah.
We originally estimated low, and now we're willing to say that our original estimate was we could reasonably estimate $100,000 more than that. We're not all right.
Yes.
I've
Conservative on all, there's multiple variables that go in there about projections of how much we're going to spend and when we're going to spend it. And I feel comfortable that, that we were on the low side when we brought that forward.
Not to speak for Jim, but I would describe it as we're being a little bit less very conservative.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, that summarizes all of the expenditure assumptions and I guess adjustments from last week's meeting and revenues, the result of which, back to our main calculator page. So you see over here on the far left side, that's a reduction to the general government budget of $362,000. No change to the Board of Ed budget, a reduction in debt service of $1.635 million. No other changes except for the revenue increases totaling $934,846 for a grand total of $2.9 million worth of adjustments, expenditures and revenues. So what that does is you factor that into where we are with the mill rate, and it results in a 31.66 mill rate, which is again down from the 32.40 that I had proposed. And in the end, so that's a 1.92 mil increase over last year, or a 6.5% tax increase.
Would you mind going through some of the cuts, since we haven't had a chance to review that as a group, some of those cuts that Jim had
Sure.
proposed?
Sure. So Jim had, yeah, here we go. All right. So Jim had sent me these ideas, and Jim, please jump in if you want at any point. Reducing the town attorney budget by $10,000. I think it's from 295,000 to 285 or something close to that. I have it right in front of me. Reducing the beautification budget to $10,000. That's still an increase and allows them to do what they had asked in this budget, which was also presented last year's budget we weren't able to fund, which was that sort of special spot project that they'd like to do in town, one each year. I've talked to Andrew about that as our liaison to the beautification committee, and he feels that it would still be sufficient to do some of the work that they'd like to do. So that's a reduction of $1,300. Jim has the Environment Commission further reduced by $4,420, so reducing it to a budget of $2,500. Similarly, the Public Safety Commission reducing the budget request to $2,500. Both of those are still an increase over where they were last year. Both of those commissions came with kind of new proposals. The Environment Commission for some sort of consulting services for the evaluation of open space parcels. The Public Safety Commission, who presented to the council on increased stop the bleed AED type supplies.
Both just the fact, both of them are still 3 times more than they
Right,
than
both
they got
would
last
still
year.
be-
They're still significant.
Because
They're
they
just
were
not-
starting at such a small part, still
Yeah.
3 times or more than what they had last year. So, I think still a reasonable place to land.
Yeah, and just to say, I mean, these are 3 committees that have been very, very active in our community. So I think increasing their, I know this is a decrease, but ultimately it's an increase from last year, is important, given some of the work that they've already proven they can do and want to do.
Yep. So the next 2 items, Jim had said we'd like to eliminate the police department's request for the civilian sign maintainer. Also similarly, cutting the HR finance requested benefits payroll position down to a part-time position, I think in your initial cuts, Jim. I think with both of those, I went back to the departments, went to the chief and talked about the civilian sign maintainer. It's a position he really believes in and really sees as a much better use of our resources, frankly, than having an officer try to fill those roles, especially when we've had turnover in the past. Sometimes we can't get to some of that really highly visible public work with respect to signs, crosswalks, line painting, all that work that sometimes we can't get to for weeks at a time since residents have been asking. So I personally still support this position if there was a way to see funding it. The chief went back and found that he felt he could trade off an additional cut of about $50,000. It's actually about $46,500 because he was also including a reduction to the Public Safety Commission. I didn't want to count that one twice. But basically paying for that position, which if you recall was $50,000. If you want, I can walk through each of those. I just got to pull up a different spreadsheet. But their budget, other trade-offs, again, we don't love to do this, but I think if that's what it took to get the position funded, that's what our recommendation would be. So this is, I guess is Jim's cut, but sort of my response to Jim's cut, if you will, on that line. I don't know how else to describe it.
Still a reduction.
Still a net reduction, right, of $50,000.
We get the position, but it's still a reduction.
That's
The reductions that the chief suggested were kind of minor in terms of overtime in a couple of areas. There's also a large, I think, membership cost for one of the associations that he felt wasn't really of value to them.
That's right. It's about $14,000 that he felt we could move away from. So that was a part of that. And then some to overtime and some to, I think it was $1,000 from ammunition and a few other items that he felt we could do. So again, it's a trade-off. It's not cuts we'd love to make, but if we're being asked to make these cuts to some sort of number there, I'd sooner go there than eliminate the position if we could do that. Similar and also very much in the category of one I really wish we didn't have to do, but if it takes funding, so for the HR position, I know Jim is here and a big proponent of this position, the HR finance position, because we've really had just a real struggle for the amount of services we provide from that office, both in support of the town and the Board of Education. We, there was a request to either eliminate or cut that in half. Cutting it in half, from our experience, really doesn't work, especially for positions like that. It's very hard to get folks to remain loyal to positions that are only 20 hours a week. They kind of come and go, take it or leave it, and sometimes you don't get kind of the maybe quality that you're looking for in that position and also the longevity.
I think I was thinking of that as kind of interim measure, for 1 year or something, but.
I mean, that's an alternative to doing this. If we want to do that, we could fund it. I will say we have a need now because we just had our prior payroll benefits person retire, probably in part because the workload was so much. And that's why we're trying to get this position in there. But yes, I mean, we could, I guess, wait till January and do kind of the half funding thing. Again, we've done that in the past, and I've supported that. I think, unfortunately, that also builds in known increase the next year. But that's an option to consider.
But I was referring it to being part-time, just for a year or something like that, or see how it goes.
Also,
what I
that's
meant by
also an
interim
option.
measure.
Yep.
But I like the switch that you made.
But again, also hard to find that person that's like, oh, I'll take the job part-time for a year and then I'll become full-time. So that might be my concern there. But, what I would suggest instead would be if we needed to offset that cost of the position at around $63,000. We do have a retiring position from the Public Works Department. They do have 2 administrative assistant 2s in the Public Works Department. They do handle a large volume of citizen calls and complaints. There's also an assistant to the Public Works Director who kind of also serves as kind of the 3-person team in that office. So again, not a cut I'd like to make, but we're being asked to find deep cuts if we can. So I would, of the 2, just seeing the need we have in finance and HR that's really become pressing, I would sooner try freezing that position for a year or eliminating it in support of this position if the council saw fit to do that. Moving on, I think Jim had a few other cuts. One was $10,000 to the tree maintenance budget. I think we were already up about $30,000 in that, or $25,000 from last year, so it's still an increase of about $15,000, I believe. Jim was proposing eliminating the bulky waste drop-off. So again, just note that this is also up. That was not in my budget, so it's both added above and now reduced here in this kind of center section. So if you kind of take it from one, you got to make sure we
Very much open for discussion, by the way.
Yep. And then taking a further usage of the medical benefits trust funding, and on the town side especially, we've been very fortunate over the last few years and continued, even with the cuts we've made during the budget process, to exceed our expectations during the year. I hope that trend continues. I had taken $200,000 in my recommended budget already, so this is in addition to that. But looking at it, I'm comfortable with where we are. In our case, about 8 months of reserves available on the town side. So Jim's recommendation was an additional $10,000 a month reduced from our funding there, which is $120 for the year. And then I added, because I think there was some discussion around conferences that Jim had asked, and I think offsetting, I would rather not go through all of those as much because some of them aren't just conferences, they're required trainings and continuing ed that you were referencing in the budget. So I did offer up, and again, we're really getting to the small numbers here, I know, but reducing town property maintenance budget, I cringe because if you walked in the front door today, you saw that we have a problem with our fire suppression system in the building that we're gonna have to address. So things pop up literally every week, but if you needed it, I could see cutting that back to 5,000. Or cutting it back by 5,000, just kind of getting to that $308,000 or so that you're at. We don't have to do that last one if you'd rather restore it. I think it's 165,000 or something, or no, hold on, 180. Most of them top of my head, but it is, there we go. Property maintenance. Oh yeah, no, oh no, I'm sorry, building. Oh yeah, building property maintenance, so it's actually broken into 2 parts, but it totals $380,000. It was $350 last year, so that'd be an increase of, instead of $30,000 increase, it'd be an increase of 25. So it is still increased, and that's why I kind of, as I went back through just one more time to try to find anything I could, this is what I came up with.
Okay. Comments or questions about these proposed cuts? Councillor Walsh.
Yeah, I just, I hate to be adding things into this, but I would like to request to add a $10,000 in, we took it out last year, and it's out again this year, for, to give towards the chamber for the fireworks for their fall festival. It's one of the biggest events we have in this town. This is the 250th anniversary. It's getting harder and harder, I know, for them to try to ask businesses to donate. Being a business owner, being asked 3 or 4 times weekly by many different organizations for donations. I try to give as much as I can, as do other businesses, but I think, I would like to see the town throw some money in to help them with that, because it is the 250th. I'm not going to try to say this semi-cinquent, whatever it is, but I think I would like to see if we could find $10,000 somewhere in the budget for that. The other thing, I think the bulky waste drop-off, it's a good alternative to the pickup, and I think, having gone 3 years without a pickup, I think a lot of people are looking for someplace to bring some of their bulky waste, and I would hate to take that out. And I know we did discuss using some of the NEF funding from that. I know we don't have enough right now, but I think we're supposed to be getting another check soon and another one in October, and hopefully that would be enough to cover the cost of that. I don't know if, because we didn't get the answer to this, but if the Board of Ed actually added in the food recycling into their budget, do you know if that was added into your? Okay, so, because last year I remember saying that you're gonna have to add that into your budget because it's really a school thing, and the town, we wanted to use the NEF funding for other things, so I don't, that might have to be added into the Board of Ed budget for the food recycling part of that too, so. And one final thing, I mean, I'm sure everybody's heard, there was talk about maybe doing a referendum question, there's signatures. The cost of that, Sean, would be approximately?
Yeah, so we had the town clerk, I think, who worked with the registrar of voters, provide an estimate. We obviously haven't done one on the operating budget in many decades. So we did have some comparables of, one-time capital projects, the Chapman property purchase. Those were smaller turnouts than I think she's thinking this could be. That's the hardest part. So I think there's a lot of variables involved. The cost, if we had to use the 7 regular polling places, is about $29,000. I think I actually talked to her earlier today, felt that might be able to do it with 3, although then maybe you have a situation where you wouldn't want to do just 3 of the 4 sort of council districts. So if you want to have 4, maybe that's a way to, so a lot of this is still kind of to be fleshed out, but that would reduce the cost to probably somewhere around $18,000 to $20,000.
Will that have to be a line item then? Would we have to add that, or are we gonna just try to find 30,000 somewhere?
It's this fiscal year, so we would just have
so it'll be, yeah.
we'd have to overspend some line.
So, talking about that, so, say for instance, we do get the added money from ECS, and it does go to a referendum, and it does say that, and the budget does come back to us after the referendum question, we could easily add that back in, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, if we needed to.
I mean,
I know,
just,
you want to keep it to yourself. I
No,
know.
I don't want to do that. I just know that the only unfortunate part, there's a lot of unfortunate parts with the timing, is just tax bills will be delayed. There's no way we'll be able to get everything out.
Yeah, no, I'm
in
hoping
June,
we don't.
so,
I'm hoping that we can come up with a budget.
So I'd
that
say,
everybody
yes,
will
you
be
can
happy
amend
with.
it. It's just know that, the whole process of issuing and then collecting is going to be delayed by a month or 2.
All right, thank you.
On net funds, how much do we have in that account at this point, roughly?
It's been a while since.
It's around 15 or 18 right now, somewhere around there, and we're supposed to be getting one this month.
I don't think we have yet, so we can follow up with that. I don't have it. I'd have to dig in on my laptop's sharing right now. I have to go find it.
Mr. Kimball, refresh my memory on the bulky waste, the 50,000 is just the use of the dumpster, correct? And wouldn't include tipping fee? Is there an estimate?
No, it would include the disposal
Okay.
estimate. So it was the full service of having a monthly drop-off location, just like we have electronics mattress, the very popular but recent last year or so drop-off. We would be adding a bulky waste roll-off. And that is, my understanding is that is the pricing. It's either for 12 months or for 10 months. I think there was some discussion about whether or not, of course, some of that, that might be affected by the tip fees. If they were up a little bit, may not be able to do one in February or something, pick a month that maybe wasn't be as popular. But no, it is, the 50,000 is intended to offer that service. The advantage from a staffing standpoint is we're already staffing with the existing budget, which we've continued in this budget, to have two usually Public Works folks there on the Saturday for managing the drop-off of recycling, electronics, et cetera. So this would be adding an option. You could go with your bulky items and dispose of them in the roll-off.
Thank you.
Any questions regarding these cuts? I also would support the bulky waste, adding that back in. I concur with Councilor Walsh. I know we've been talking about this for a long time. It's something we negotiated when we negotiated the new contract with AJ Waste. We had looked at a lot of different options, and this was one that we came together on. I believe this was in the budget last year as well, and it ended up being cut last year. So it's one that I would like to see brought back as well.
Can we see what it looks like with it?
Well, you saw without.
All right, this is currently without it.
Yep.
This is without 3166. And then if we just eliminate Mr. Jinks's proposal, there we go. It is back in, and it's 3168. 31.68. So
$6.
$6. Yeah.
Which
Goes
is,
from,
is cheaper than a drop-off at AJ Waste right now.
yeah, so it goes from is that 6.6? Yeah, 618 to 624, or a difference of 6.46% to 6.52%.
That's not including some net fund usage, though.
I'm sorry, net.
That's not including some net fund usage. If you try to fund
Yeah, that is not. That's true.
The net funds, though, correct?
I think they're covered for the year. Is that right? I believe, yeah. So well, yes.
Next year.
But for next year, is it covered? Not really covered next year. Yeah. And do we have any schools? Because I know Chapman, it was Chapman, so it's going to be no longer Chapman.
Yeah, it's Chapman, Doolittle, and we piloted at Dodd this year, so there are 3 new schools that are going to come.
Okay, Highland and Dodd.
Yeah, Barnum will be next year.
Barnum will be next year. Okay. That's one more item that Board of Education would have to fund if I mean, obviously, we won't be able to fund it fully with the NEF funds anyway, but that's an additional cost with the Board of Ed. Councilor Craig.
I just wanted to ask a question about the drop-off. What does that look like as far as physical? People take the junk from their homes, and instead of putting it out front and having us pick it up, they put it in their car, and then they physically drive it to the AJ Waste. Then they remove it from the car, and they put it in the dumpster?
Transportation.
Transfer station. So I'm just asking physically, what does that look like for, let's say, a senior or just?
Yeah, so the only correction I would make is not AJ Waste. It would be to Waterbury Road to the Public Works, the former transfer station, so the same drop-off site as our other stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's certainly, no doubt, we talked about this last time, I think it's not the same service as the curbside. The curbside, I think we've estimated, is about $325,000 to $350,000 for a full town run. But yes, either somebody's gonna have to take it, or either pay someone or have a friend or family member with probably ideally a pickup truck, or just depends on the bulky item, but to bring it there and then, unload it into the roll-offs there. The Public Works folks are there to help a little bit with that process. I think it's a walk-in. If you've done the I mean, I've done like an old TV and whatnot, you just bring it there and walk it into the roll-off, or however they have to handle it. We have an area there, again, I'm not certain of the specifics yet, it would still have to be fleshed out. There's an area where you could drop off from above into a just like any other old transfer station.
Would the town be able to help any disabled, elderly citizens that might have documented need for help with that service?
Do you mean at the transfer station itself or actually getting it to the transfer station?
Just using, if as a town, we're providing that service as a collective good, which is amazing, there are some citizens in our town that won't be able to actively engage in using that service, although paying for it through their taxes. Would we be able to facilitate some sort of ADA help for elderly or disabled families that have need of this service? They want to use it, but they can't because it's more than just bringing it, their neighbors helping them bring it to the curb.
Yeah, and we had talked about this, and and that is a concern, right? That is one of the bigger concerns. The hope is that there will be a cottage industry that will develop. I mean, we've seen groups in town that have worked in terms of raking leaves with, coming together, and so could there be some cottage industry or service group come together? That's the hope. But that's something that we haven't necessarily provided for. In regards to actually at the transfer station, I know that when I have utilized the transfer station, the Public Parks Works people have been very helpful in moving things from my vehicle and assisting in that way. So they've been, our town employees, our municipal employees have been very supportive in that form and fashion. But that is the concern, right? That this is different from the curbside, it's less accessible. Mm-hmm. And that is something that is a concern that we had talked about last year in sustainability. Yeah. So I guess if we start with those cuts, maybe that's a good place to start. And bulky waste is one we've had a discussion here. So if we have a sense of people who are supportive of adding bulky waste back in, can I just get a feel for who is supportive of bringing bulky waste? Councilor Walsh, Councilor Tedisco, yes or no? Yes.
I think as long as we use some of those net funds, I'm fine with it. And maybe if we use some of those net funds for that, we can bring in some money for fireworks too.
Councilor Talbot?
I agree with Jim. I would say yes, but again, caution that if we're going to continue with the compost program, that some of those net funds are going to be needed for that.
So concerned about net funds. Bulky waste.
I don't agree that should come from the town side. I think that's more of a Board of Ed, since it is a school function now. I mean, we did it to get it started off as a pilot program, but I think the Board of Ed needs to start budgeting that in, because there could be I don't know if that came down yet, but there's supposed to be a mandate coming that certain schools of certain size are going to have to do this. So that would fall, I think, into the Board of Ed side of funding versus the town side, in my opinion.
So adding money to the Board of Ed to be able to cover these costs.
I mean, I don't know how much, maybe, Emily, you can get us a cost on it and let us know. I mean, but, I mean, I'm guessing it's probably around 50,000 maybe for 3 schools, or?
Yeah, it was, I think that we got around 35,000 last year, and that covered the cost for those 3.
Did that also include the barrels and stuff that we probably won't need to, so that might be a little less even, so. Vin knew those numbers pretty well, he's not here, but I think, just if we already have the equipment, it may not be that much.
Yeah, I mean, I would say Barnum's a lot bigger than Chapman.
Yes, they might need extra barrels, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And
The tipping cost goes up.
Right.
I was going to say, isn't there a waste diversion savings in that program as well?
There would be some. There's still a cost, but it's more.
Big pen.
It costs more than it saves.
Yes. But it's good for the earth.
Yeah.
Day after Earth Day.
yeah,
It's the right thing to do, the day after Earth Day.
Yeah.
Any other questions, concerns about any of these proposed reductions? Are we comfortable with these reductions that are proposed?
Just one other thing, for the medical, can you go back and scroll up there? The medical funding, that's just the town side.
Yeah.
Is there any way we could take anything off the Board of Ed side?
I mean, ultimately, you don't have line item authority over the Board of Education, so it's ultimately their decision where they would take any adjustments.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's room.
Well, we have a $300,000 cut that we have already put on them, if we accept the town manager's $300,000 cut. And so if
Were you thinking of that coming off that end of it, Sean, when you took that, or the 300, or you just didn't know where it was coming?
No, I mean, again, it was more based on the overall impact, the overall tax mill rate that we were ending on.
Right.
The concern about the sustainability there. And also the ECS funding, which we've all talked about and we've shared and been lobbying together on. So it just is difficult, as we've said before, to continue having that level of state funding since 1991. Used to make up almost a third of the Board of Education budget. It makes up less than 10% now. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge we all share.
Can I just ask Dr. Solon one thing? Because I know you sent out an email about cutting the middle school sports. Was the cost for the middle school, correct me if I'm wrong, you said it was around $84,000, if I recall, that was?
Yeah.
So,
In the vicinity, I mean, it's more than that, so we're looking at more than 100, I think it was.
I thought it was 130.
Yeah, I thought it was 130.
130, and
Yeah.
is that something that if we don't put back the 300,000, that's where you're suggesting to cut? I mean, ultimately, it's the Board of Ed's decision to figure that out, but I mean, you're suggesting, so.
Yeah, right now, as I look at it, if we don't touch medical benefits, we don't have $300,000 to cut someplace else. Like, if we want to retain class sizes the way they are, what I had proposed the other day, and our class sizes, our students per staff are at the bottom of Dirt B already, in terms of most students per staff. So if we don't want to go there, because that's where the most cost is, really, then we do have to look at other places. And, the athletics and the technology was another place that I had talked about, but it was about $150,000. So those are real possibilities.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and just, I've got the potential 300K reduction summary sheet in front of me. So it was, yeah, for middle school interscholastic sports, it would be 131,320. Staff desktops, they're currently on a 5-year replacement cycle. They would move to a 6-year. That would be 115,000. Instructional supply, 5,000, losing instructional supplies like vertical whiteboard and science math manipulatives, and textbook and software, 50,000. New physics textbook, software, old ones from 2012.
Well, Dr. Solon, I mean, there's other the budget also includes 8 new certified positions, brand-new positions, in addition to positions you have right now. I mean, certainly, I suppose you could take you could not hire 8 people, and you would save some of that $300,000 or the $130,000 and save middle school sports. Or, well, let's start there.
Sure, I'd be happy to go back and review the growing enrollment that we have. With the positions were meant to, in essence, sustain our enrollment. With those additions, we're still near the highest class sizes we have. The positions we're adding at Dodd are 2 8th grade positions to take the class size average from 26 to 24. The elementary positions we're hiring are to take our class size average from 19, which is the highest it's been in a very long time, I can tell you at least a decade, down to 18.8. It really doesn't move anything because of the enrollment growth. The other positions we're hiring are generally part-time specialist positions like art, PE, things like that, because with the growth in number of sections that we have at the elementary schools, in order for teachers to get prep periods, we have to hire those people to cover the additional sections of art, health, PE that we have. So, I mean, if we don't cover those, we're just moving the class sizes up. And our priority has been to try and ensure that we're meeting our classroom obligations first and foremost. I think one thing that gets occasionally forgotten, because it was so long ago, that we already went through and cut $1.2 million out of our budget. And that's a history of reducing line items over the course of many years. The delta between what our per pupil expenditure is and everybody else's has only grown significantly over the last decade. I've heard the highest per pupil expenditures, those are the really small districts with high overhead. Okay, so let's cut the top 25 of those. Let's cut the lowest 25 with the mega districts. You know, we're still $11 million behind peers in terms of our per pupil spending. So, like, all those other lines have been thinned out all the way. So yeah, I mean, could we save sports by not hiring 2 teachers? Yes. That jacks up class sizes. That's just the bottom line.
I mean, a person sitting here at this point with budgets also has to think about the tax rate and taxes also. I mean, everything's a trade-off. I mean,
fair enough.
You're doing a great job.
Thank
you. And to some extent, we take advantage of you because you're doing a great job with less money than a lot of other districts do. And that's clear from the facts. It's just that there's higher interest expense this year. There's other things that are being paid for. 2 new schools are coming on. That shows a commitment of the town to education.
No doubt.
And that maybe, and I'm not saying where anybody's going. Nobody up here may agree with me, and I'm not sure where I'm coming out yet.
Sure.
But somebody could say maybe you wait a couple of years for some of these things. You're doing a great job, and frankly, without the extra teachers, you'll do a great job next year. And the trade-off is for the taxpayers, if that's where you go.
Sure. Yeah. So, you know, $130,000 reduction at this point for us, because we've been lean for that period of time, it is meaningful. And that's why I've been the superintendent here for a decade and have never, you know, marched up here and said, hey, we're going to have to cut sports to do this, or cut, you know, other core programs, because I'm not trying to stir the pot. Like, this is where we've reached in terms of our expenditures, and I am very concerned about that. I did, in the last meeting, suggest the possibility of taking a look at the Medical Benefits Trust Fund, knowing that we're more than 2 months ahead there as a potential option. I mean, that's a real calculated gamble that we try and avoid. But I definitely don't want to cut sports. I definitely don't want to compromise the classroom experience, as you know, Mike was talking about earlier, in terms of our technology. Beyond what we've already compromised, and I know, Mr. Tedesco, that you're very understanding of where we are as a school system. We have made a lot of compromises to get to this point, and it's like, when do we reach a point where there's just no place else to turn without hitting classroom experiences? And I'm afraid we're there over this time. I'm certainly encouraged. That's why Monday I was up at the state, again, lobbying the ECS changes. It needs to change. As was mentioned earlier, 35 years. I was in high school and we were getting $10 million from the state in terms of ECS grants. And this isn't a Cheshire problem. You know, they're walking out of class in Meriden, they're walking, you know, Hamden is decimated, North Haven is dying. Like, everybody is really struggling. And I'm really hopeful that, you know, we see that I'm fairly confident from the people that I've spoken to in Hartford that, you know, there will be money on the table for ECS. And that, you know, we will see that influx. I'd hate to, at the same time we're getting that influx, you know, continue to cut and reduce services at a time where we're like one of the few school systems that's really growing. We're going to add 225 kids between the end of last year and the start of next. It's tough to do that without adding staffing.
Are they already signed up to 225? That's a certain number?
There's a projection. All the projections we've had historically in the last several years as we've been growing, we've met or exceeded those projections. So I feel that the 225 is fairly safe. A lot of those kids are kids that have signed up over the course of this year. Not all 225 though, that there's a certain amount that are projected for summer.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, and just to clarify, because I have those projections in front of me here, you had on June 2025, 4,257, January 8th, 2026, so this year, that was already up to 4,372. And the continued projection is adding another 110 to make it 4,482 for a total of 225. So we're already over halfway there.
Can you? Are you still at 6 retirements? 5. 5?
Yeah.
So that's what you budgeted, 5 retirements?
Yeah, we had already, when we made the $1.2 million reduction, we calculated that in. And, you know, I've heard questions about our staffing, so I put this together.
Okay.
At the bottom of the chart, it shows 2015-16 to going up to the 24-25 school year, because that's the last year we have comp data for. We don't have comp data for 25-26, our current school year. So, you know, back in 15-16, we had 4,360 students, 400.8 staff. Last year, 2,457 students, 416.7 staff. So our students per staff ratio went from 10.8 to 10.22. The difference from the CPS per student spending, and the state per student spending average at that time was $1,000. Last year it was $3,400 per student, for a total of $14 million difference. That actually happens to be almost exactly what we pay in medical benefits, because that has escalated substantially. The rationale for why our per student number has gone up slightly over the last decade. We have, in the last several years, transitioned. Our high school teachers used to teach 6 classes, and they went to 5. So in that period, they phased that in because nobody else in Connecticut had their teachers teaching 6 classes. We would have lost that in arbitration. It would have cost us more money. So we had to phase that in. The other element here is that we've added multiple classrooms for intensive education and therapeutic programming. Those are very low number of students per staff ratio. But we've done that to avoid outplacement costs. So the narrative at the bottom, back at 15-16, the state average for outplacement was 5.4% of all special ed students. At that time, Cheshire was at 4.1%. Today, an outplacement costs $200,000 per student. So we've brought our outplacement ratio down to 3%. The delta between the 3% that we're at and the 4.5% that the state is currently at is the equivalent of 9 students, or $1.8 million. It hasn't cost us $1.8 million to build these programs. we've saved money. Our ratio has gone up a drop as a result, but we've not just saved money, but we've kept these children in our community and I will argue provided a better level of service than they would have got if they were outplaced. Now they're not on the bus for however long to go to a place. They're getting the services in our community. Does the ratio go up? Yes, it does. Is it economically a smarter decision? Absolutely.
Can you just explain, because for us
Sure.
lay people, the $200,000 per student for outplacement, you said?
Right.
Can you explain, I mean, that sounds like an awful lot
It's
of money.
astronomical. It is an awful lot of
What
money.
what does it entail? Because I'm not familiar with it, so I just.
Sure, that's a combination, Don, of not just tuition. The tuition is usually about $140,000. It's, it's ridiculous. The needs are pretty significant. If a student in Cheshire is being outplaced, we have worked hard to build programs when there's a number of students that it reaches a place where it makes sense for us to build a program. We can't build a program for $200,000 because you need to have a teacher, usually a paraeducator, maybe like an OT, PT support person there. But when the number of students with a particular need area is enough, we'll build and grow internal programs to keep them in. It's $140,000 for tuition and $60,000 for transportation.
Is it to a different district, or is it, who gets that $140,000?
Generally, it's not another school system. It's usually a private provider. So, maybe you've heard of High Road School or Ben Haven or schools that if it's one student, two students, usually we won't have 4 students going to one provider, because if we did, we'd work on building our own program, at a more efficient rate. We'll take the 200,000, we'll take people in. We did take other students in at a tuition rate at Quinnipiac, but that got cut off. They didn't like us doing that. So we were generating revenue at one point from that, but we're not able to do that any longer. So yeah, the ratios and the number of students have gone up, but it's a cost and efficiency and quality measure is why we do that. So that's why our per pupil expenditure is lower than other districts who are sending their kids out of district. The outplacement rate I was looking at the Derby districts, there's a couple above 10%. That's insane how much money they're spending on outplacement. So that's part of where our efficiency comes from. So yeah, the number of students, the number of teachers go up, but it's meant to address this as a fiscal, like you guys are doing, with some of these other programs, municipal, sign person or, just finding efficiencies. It's cheaper than having a fireman do it or something with the hydrants and whatnot. So, sorry, I'm passionate about this. I'm concerned about it. And that's why, I don't know that you're used to hearing me speak with this sort of conviction, because I am concerned about it. And I want to be able to provide composting, because I think it's a good program. It's a great thing for kids. It's going to cost us about $50,000, but I don't know where I get that from at this point.
Yes, Councilor Tupper.
More of a comment. It doesn't appear, at least right now, that the council has an intent to, although there are some people that would support it, to add back in the $300,000 that Town Manager Kimball cut. I would urge my Board of Ed colleagues that are here tonight and may be watching to utilize Medical Benefits Trust. I know it's not one of the things that you like to tap into, but it's $25K a month off of 100,000 additional each month. So it lowers it down to 75,000 a month. It's still a $900,000 increase. You're coming off a pretty good
Yeah, careful.
March. Yeah, exactly. Actually, I probably should do this one instead, Jeff. So right now you're at about 2.8. You want to keep at least 2 months in there. But the other piece of this is if we did get some sort of bogey from ECS and it topped the 250, we could infuse that into Medical Benefits Trust to replenish what you guys took out. I mean, it's an easy way to do it for now, and there's a backup in case something happens. That's my only comment.
Councilor Kramer?
I just wanted to get on record that penny wise, pound foolish with the Board of Ed budget comes to mind. So certain things are easier to cut emotionally. It's easier to cut back on replacing computers than it is to cut teachers. And there are certain line items that is the immediate go-to to find money in a budget. But we're talking about technology here, and I'm specifically speaking about that, although there are plenty of other examples. You will have a compounding cost for some of the things that, a knee-jerk reaction to cut. So let's say we don't replace computers this year, next year. It saves us, next year it saves us the money of replacing, I don't know how many desktops would be replaced next year. But those computers are still aging. They still need to be replaced. It still is a spend. You're just deferring it for another year, which is going to compound on the computers that need to be replaced that year as well. So to try and cut the budget in ways that save $100,000 this year, but put that $100,000 plus, because computers might be more expensive or whatever, $150,000 on next year's budget, I just don't see the sense in that. It still needs to be paid for, and possibly at a higher rate next year. So, and that's something that we all juggle as we're deciding this budget, but it's something to keep in mind. Teachers that aren't hired next year are still going to be needed the year after that. So hiring 8 teachers this year and 5 teachers next year, if we don't hire the 8 this year, you're still going to need the extra 8 teachers on top of 5 the second year, which is just going to balloon our budget 2 years out instead of trying to maintain as gradual a rise as we can right now. And I do hope that everybody knows, and everybody who's listening, so many people on this panel have been to Hartford. We've been pleading the case of the ECS numbers to everybody who will listen, special meetings, people in the office, legislators that we just happen to pass by. Cheshire is bringing the dire need for the increase in the ECS to Hartford every chance we get. We have people who are committed to seeing this number become more fair as a distribution from the state to the municipalities to help with the increased education costs, because it's ridiculous that we've been sitting on the same number for forever, as the state knows that every cost has gone up, not just salaries, but include interest or, supplies. So we're trying not to put the burden on the taxpayers, as every municipality is doing, but until the state comes online and listens to our pleas, how else does a municipality come up with money to educate their children? And Cheshire we need to fund our values. I know I've heard that a million times, and one of the biggest values in Cheshire is our education system, which supports our property values, it supports our crime rates, it supports our children, our families, and, this is an incredibly hard decision to make, because The added expense is real. The extra $50 a month out of someone's paycheck is real. I've said it before, it could be a medication, it could be groceries. So the burden of this decision is so incredibly heavy, and I just want to say I appreciate everybody's input, I appreciate everybody's support, and just know that we are doing everything we can possibly think of to do to try and mitigate this situation which we find ourselves in. That's all.
Counselor,
Yeah, to follow up what Peter said, I know that there probably isn't an appetite for 300,000, although I would be a supporter of that. But can we look at what giving 150,000 back would look like on a mill rate? It was 3168 before, right?
3171.
So it's a, and that .3 is, how much does that translate into the additional cost for the average taxpayer? So, I mean, I would be supportive of $150,000, an additional $150,000 adjustment here.
Counselor Walsh.
I just want to chime in here. I think, we could keep adding things in here. Oh, it's only $5 here, $10 here, $5 here, $3 here. Before you know it, you're up to $1,000 again. And I think, adding back 150, I have a concern for the 25% of the people in this town who are struggling to pay their bills. And that's a fact. If you don't believe it, look it up. It's a lot of them might have kids in these schools, and they might not be able to afford to even stay in this town and have their kids educated in this town because we're raising these taxes. So I would be very cautious about doing that. And I think if they could find the money in the medical trust to take it off, I would prefer that at this time, and hope that there's some kind of money that we get in extra money in ECS or something that could offset that. But I mean, right now, the average taxpayer's bill is going from a 4-figure tax bill per year to a 5-figure tax bill per year. It's a big jump, and it's if you add it to the last several years, I mean, we're going in a direction that is getting very scary for some people in this town, and I think we have to be cautious about that. And I think if we can find some money in the medical trust and pray that everybody stays healthy and we can get through until the next year and a half when some of the North End money starts coming back into to us. I think that's what we really need to start looking at. I would be against adding 150 back, and I'd like to stay with what our town manager has suggested.
Would anyone else like to speak to putting back $150,000 back into the Board of Education budget? Counselor Tedesco.
Yeah, I mean, I had suggested and talked about a larger decrease in the vicinity of $700,000 as opposed to $300,000 for reasons which I've already expressed. And I decided to do it publicly now because I think that's fair for taxpayers. People may not like me, but that's what I thought. But I don't think that's going to happen. I would not be in favor of adding $150,000 back. I'm not sure where I'm going generally, but I'm not in favor of that.
I wouldn't support it either.
Nope. Keep it off.
I would support it, but I'm, and Counselor Jinks are in the minority. $1,000 get later. So we are back at 3.168, 1.94 mil increase at the cost of to the average taxpayer, $624, which would be a 6.52% increase. I did want to add, there was a tiny bit, but there was, just looking at 2026, we had included the opioid funds as covering some of the it was under expenditures. And I don't know if that's something, if we still have more, are we anticipating more of the opioid funds covering the costs of any of the line items in our budget? It was used for the counselor's salary, the substance abuse counselor's salary. It was $26,481.
Yeah, I think last time that brought it from 50% to 100% funded. Hold on one second. I think, let me confirm. Yeah, it's still using all of the opioid funding. Hold on one second.
Okay. Just going through in terms of past
Yeah.
years, what we've used and what we haven't, yeah.
I just wanted to confirm. Hold on one second. Where is it? There it is. Yep, fully funded. Okay, so, yeah, we went to that last year, and we're already going to it again, because we're still funding. If you look on page 144 of our budget book, it says the clinician position is fully funded by the National Opioid Settlement Funds again this year. So what you're seeing in 26 is we went from 50% to 100% funding, so there's kind of no further we can go there.
Can't go any more than 100,
No,
yep.
can't go higher than 100%.
And I would just highlight again for the public, you know, we are seeing lost revenue, second year in a row with the motor vehicle tax grant that we received from the state, and that's mill rate determined. And can you refresh my memory what the mill rate is? I always forget. Is it 332.4?
Yeah, so 3246 is the cap. So we don't hit the cap, even with my proposed budget, which was just under that, 3240. There would be no reimbursement. So you're correct that, I guess somewhat ironically, some of these higher towns, some of those comparables we looked at last month where their mill rates are 37, 38, 39, 40, the West Hartford's, they're actually getting a pretty substantial grant back for the dollars they are above that 32.46 mils for the car vehicle taxes. As you remember, we recall from a few years ago when we were over that, so pre-reval, we were at 35 mils. Unfortunately, there's a lag in when you get that reimbursement by a solid year, which makes it very difficult to budget. And if you remember, we got it the year after reval, and then what exactly you're referencing is then it disappeared, which we knew we weren't going to be eligible for it, but it was sort of odd that we had it the year our mill rate was 27, because it was really for last year's 35 mill rate, if you will. So, yeah, we are still under it. If we cross over 32.46, obviously not looking like we will this year, but if we do next year, there's no immediate offset, I guess would be my forewarning. You don't get to then say, oh, well, don't worry, we'll be getting this, because you won't get that for the following fiscal year.
Okay.
It drives finance directors and town managers crazy. It's not a well-written policy.
Thank you for that clarification. Superintendent Solon, since it looks like, just going back to the Board of Education cuts, obviously, it's the Board of Education that would determine those cuts, but if you were to use some of that $300,000 towards medical benefits, where do you foresee other cuts potentially coming at this point? I know you've given us a list, but.
Well, I think I would probably prefer to wait until the end of the month to see the rate, to see the medical benefits billing for this month before we were to commit to $300,000. I mean, of course, we have the flexibility once allocated to maneuver money within the budget as necessary. So, you know, maybe we would start there knowing that, you know, we may have to pivot toward the end of next year. What I wouldn't do is, right now, I would have to try and start hiring as soon as possible. We're already trying to interview so that we can get a jump on, there aren't a lot of kids coming out of college, unfortunately, but we want to try and hire the best, youngest people that we can to keep that budget number as low as we can. That might give us some insight too on our hiring. So to answer, you know, I'd prefer to try and keep it within the medical benefits, but we might have to pivot if necessary. As it stands now, and I've said to Peter before, like, there aren't a lot of discretionary lines in our budget, and we start the year telling principals, all right, you can spend 40% of that. We're still at 60% right now because we don't have a choice come June 30th. We have to make budget. We have to meet our budget. We can't overexpend or roll over a year or something. So we don't spend all of the money because snowstorms happen like they did this year. And so now it's like, that's way over budget. We have to pay for that from someplace else. And we'll be doing stuff at the end of the year. So we'd be doing the same thing next year, just hoping our medical benefits is good, and we'll know more about the ECS funding. We'll have to roll with it.
So right now, if we can look at the budget calculator where we are right now. So we are looking at a target mill rate of 31.68. That would be an increase of 1.94, less than 2 mills from last year, for an average increase of 6.52%, which would cost the average taxpayer $624 annually.
And that's on a house and 2 average vehicles.
Thank you. Councilor Jinks.
Thank you. Sean, do you happen to have that spreadsheet handy that shows the comparable mill rates of the other towns?
Oh, sure. It's my favorite one.
It's a pretty chart.
It is.
Oh, jeez. Thanks, guys.
How much did he pay you to ask for that?
Blushing. Here it is. It's been improved since the last meeting, as the council knows, because we've added a column here about whether or not towns have curbside waste pickup or not, which I think is pretty telling. And if you see here, this kind of streak of no's, coincidentally, is a lot of our peer towns, these Derg B towns with higher mill rates. That's your Avon, Middlebury, Woodbridge, Glastonbury, Simsbury's. Just another point of a note. Oh, sorry, I know it's so small on that screen up there, but those communities, you also have to separately pay for trash collection, which here in Cheshire is included in your tax bill. So just another evidence of our relative bargain. But sorry, Mr. Jinks, I'm sure you want to say something.
Yeah, could we just plug in the current 3168 and just kind of see where we're falling on this now?
Oh, yeah, I think we're still pretty. We don't move too much there, I think, because here, let me sort by. I'll sort by our mill rate, largest. There we go. So, I don't know, it's probably hard to see. I'll try to zoom in. I mean, we stay between our, at least this is where, and just a caveat for anyone seeing this for the first time, that column C is, as of last week, where those towns were with their proposed budgets. In some cases, those are the initial, town manager or first selectman proposed budget. In some cases, that's the Board of Finance's approved budget that's either final or going to a next step or a town meeting. Every town has a little different process. But that's at least the most recent information we had. This is now sorted by mill rate. So Mr. Jinks, it keeps us at, again, staying around the number 11, here it is, not counting the first row, on the list of the 30 towns. These are comparable by all sorts of metrics. DERG, proximity to Cheshire, just all of our neighboring towns are on this list. And also towns that were either similarly population or just compared to frequently playing sports. I don't know, any of the categories you want. That's just the list here. It's not a, there's no other, it's not a precise list of exact comparables, but it's the ones we're most often compared to. If you take that, Jim, and take our estimated tax bill, again, this is just a rough estimate using a list of median assessed values for these 30 towns. And we're here kind of pretty squarely, as we saw last week, within our, sorry, I'm just kind of zooming in, our, I would say, probably most comparable peers. These are, if you see column G, there's a lot of DERG B towns there.
Guilford just rejected theirs, I think. They just had a vote.
They did.
Guilford did have a 2 days ago, I think their budget got rejected. But they are otherwise here. If you sort, again, yes, Guilford has a lower mill rate, but their higher median home value is what puts them right now sorted with actually a little bit higher tax rate than we would have, because we have on average lower home values than the Guilford houses are. But
And no curbside garbage there.
and no curbside garbage, exactly, and recycling.
And their assessments in 28 hours was already increased.
Yeah, and their assessments 28. That's a great point, because the ones to kind of be aware of, and none of them make the list here because we have that adjustment. But yeah, these towns that are yellow 27s, they're going through reval right now, so it's a little harder to compare to. But that's your Middlebury's, your Durham's. These are their projected mill rates, and again, like we did 2 years ago, they're projected to fall 18 to 25%. But yes, that's a great point. Revals every 5 years, yep. So our next one, I used fiscal years here just for ease, because technically establishing the fiscal 27 budget right now, we're using the 25, October 25 grand list. In our case, we're on the kind of an 18-23, so we'll be reval again 28, which is October of 28. So the fiscal 30 budget will be your next reval affected budget. I would point out the 5 years prior to that, and I was here, we just happened to be a time in 2018 where we didn't really feel much of an impact. We had an overall reval result that was around, I think it was 0.6% increase to our grand list. I mean, it just kind of felt like almost a normal year. Obviously, this last year, post-COVID, exactly, was a 25% increase in our grand list. And so then obviously a huge shift from commercial to residential.
And at the risk of beating a dead horse, but it is one of my favorite pastimes. Guilford spends $2,200 more per student than we do.
Another good friend of yours?
Yeah, he's a friend of mine.
Stick up.
Paul, yeah. Harass my friends.
They have a nice waterfront property.
Yeah.
Other comments, questions regarding the mill rate the beautiful rainbow mill rate comparison sheet?
Fruit colors. The only comment I would make to Mr. Wolf's point is that the further we get away from, I mean, arguably, the communities that did their reval in 25 based on 23 saw the most dramatic increases. The further we get away, you're going to get into the category of, communities that post-COVID, had another reval in between. So the percentages are going to be less and less dramatic. Ours is going to be probably back to the, a pretty routine change when we do it in 30.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think especially your Simsbury's, your Glastonbury's, and South Windsor's here, where it says 29. Remember, that's really a 27, that's an October 1st of 27 reval date. A lot of what happened October 1st of 22, 5 years prior, those increases are already absorbed in there. So I would not expect, just on reval alone, that Simsbury, Glastonbury, or South Windsor will expect to fall from 35, 38. They're not going to fall to 29 like we were seeing before. They're going to stay right around 35, 38. I would project, because a lot of those spikes happened in 22 and into 23.
Yeah. All right, should we move back to the calculator?
So glad I created this. Yep, here it is. Do you want this sheet or the list? I don't know. I'm trying to make it legible on the screens, but just let me know where you'd like to go.
Okay. So, I mean, there was just one other issue. I know, Councilor Walsh, you had mentioned the fireworks as an addition. So,
Just because we took it off last year, and being the 250th, I think it would be nice if we could throw some money to them to do that.
I think if we budget 10K of net funds for the bulky waste, we could just use 10K for fireworks, right?
You can't use the net fund for fireworks.
No, I'm saying use
Your mill rate would stay the same.
10K of net funds for bulky waste.
Right, I did not put that in here, so the 10,000. I mean, we're getting to numbers that won't really move the mill rate, but yeah, the 10,000. It won't, no, that won't move the mill rate, but it would, yeah, I mean, I have not put in the 10,000 use of net funds as a revenue item. We can add it, and we will, but,
Aren't part of the budget, right?
no.
So some of that bulky waste can come out of there, I mean, if we take half.
Jim, how would you prefer to do that? Take it as a revenue or just budget 40,000 for bulky waste and pay for the rest out of NEF funds? Because the council appropriates the NEF funds separately. Would you just change it to 40,000?
I don't know, I kind of like the revenue,
Yeah,
budget the revenue.
it's fine. We'll put it one way or the
So
other.
leave it in there as the 50.
And then put 10,000.
10K in from NEF revenue,
Yeah,
and then put in a minus 10K for.
I don't, 10,000 for the fireworks is a new number than what it used to be. Used to be 5 plus we paid for the part of the insurance, which I think was 1,000 or 1,500. And it may have gone up, so I didn't know if 10,000 was a new real number.
Went up a lot.
Okay.
And I know
Yeah.
she had to get a lot of money from.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, Regency.
it doesn't bother me. I didn't know if it was the new number.
If it's more than that, you think they could source that from local businesses? If it,
As I said, being a business owner, we get hit up 3 or 4 times a week from different organizations. And I would be happy to donate as much as I can to it, and I'm sure other businesses will, but what it does is it takes away, well, I might be donating to the chamber for something else or another group, you know, because we only have so much money we can donate.
but the
and,
10,000 from the town definitely makes a difference.
10,000 will make a big difference. I think that will do most of it. I think because there's insurance involved, and it's not just fireworks. It's the fireworks and insurance. And I think she would be happy getting that much and figuring out how she could fund the rest. I mean, now that, and with Prospect being part of it, I don't know how that falls into the fall festival, but I'll let her figure that out. But I think it would be. I know that many businesses would be appreciative of trying to support this, and I think it's just it's a big thing for the town. I think the town really gets around that, and we don't really have many big celebrations like this. And I know it's after the 4th of July, but I think it's a good way to end the summer with that.
I will just say, I know that many, correct me if I'm wrong, but during the reval last time, I know that it did hit our homeowners more so than it did our businesses in town, and that the taxes actually, am I correct in remembering that? That the taxes actually decreased for many of our top businesses in town after the reval?
Yeah, for some, I mean, you know, the impact is
Varied.
different across, but yeah, I think our top 2 or 3 did experience a shift, so therefore a reduction, I think, from when we fell from 35 mils to 27 mils.
Yeah.
Because their relative increase wasn't as high as the residential increases.
And our top taxpayer in terms of business is CLMP or Eversource. So you have to remember, when we're taxing them, it's going to affect our electric bill too. So it's kind of a catch-22. You know, we're going to be paying their tax bill as well. So yeah, and they're our number 1 taxpayer right now. So indirectly, that affects all of us as well.
So, yeah, so I guess we'll go down the road. So are we, I guess, start with the NEF funds. Well, we'll start with fireworks, I guess. Supportive of bringing fireworks back into the budget?
It's a small number, as long as it's neutral, though, I'm saying.
Yeah.
As long as it's neutral, I'm
Yep.
fine, even if it's a small number.
And
It is, and it was. The
looks like
calculator
we're,
works.
okay. So we are right back where we were. So it is 9:50, 9:48. Go around the room. Are we comfortable bringing this budget to the table next Tuesday? And so we'll just go down the row.
I still don't like that number. I'm kind of with Lou. I think we need to take more off.
Lou? Councilor Tedisco?
We just wanted to bring it forward. We're not voting on it, yes or no yet.
We're correct. We're just bringing this forward for next week.
People have the opportunity, if they want, we should make adjustments on Tuesday.
No more adjustments to the budget. This is the last time to make adjustments, but we'd be voting. Mhm.
I'm comfortable with going forward.
I mean, my preference is to add back in some Board of Ed, but I know we don't have that option really, so we are where we are.
Yes.
Yes, at 3168.
I'm comfortable too. So with that, a motion, a formal
You
motion?
can, you
Just-
can do a motion of the budget, do a motion from Budget Committee and a vote from just yourself, Ms. Mankey, and Mr. Walsh.
You have to separate out the.
No,
Okay.
no, because it's all you're not passing it.
Yeah.
You're just recommending that this move to the council, and ultimately the full council will decide it, and Ms. Mankey will recuse herself from that.
So with that, with my Budget Committee members, I need a motion to move forward the budget as outlined in the mill rate calculator to the full council. Discussion? All those,
I'm sorry. Can I just add one quick point before you do? So we had 2 other, these are small, just sort of cleanup items. They don't affect the decision here, so I know we'll go right back to that. But I didn't want you to be surprised when we had a couple of items that are on you'll get a final list of, it won't look just like this because this is mostly last year's, Jim, right?
Right.
What we call a summary of budget adjustments. It kind of takes what we're doing on the calculator, which is not a formal document, and it puts it into this formal final version. I just want to bring to your attention 2 quick items. One small, one's bigger, but it doesn't end up affecting the ultimate adopted budget. But on the general government side, we realized when we had that position from the pool that we're moving over to Public Works. We had not moved the associated overtime for that individual. That number is $7,500 typically budgeted in the pool budget. When you move something out of the pool budget, just real quick, because it's its own special revenue fund, we have to move it out of the pool budget. and then adjust the town's subsidy of the pool by that 7,500, and then move the 7,500 into the public works budget. So it's neutral all around. I just don't want you to be surprised if you see that number and say, I didn't see that on the calculator. The other one, which is a bigger number, but it was just simply a typo. If you recall, when we were looking at the WPCD, so separate from general fund, won't affect your vote right now, but the WPCD revenue projections were high, increased by like $900,000. I had Jim and Gina go back and look at why that was. It turns out there was a miscalculation in there. So we will not be adding 900,000 to the fund balance of the WPCD, which is what it kind of looked like on paper. It is more budget and revenue expenditure neutral. There's a slight increase, I think, to fund balance, but it is on, so this, I'm sorry, it's very small up there. But this change, why did it disappear? Oh, give me strength. Come on, come back.
We saw it.
You saw it. Okay. It's 914,000. Just want you to know that that's there, and it's not something we're slipping in any way. It's just two cleanup items that I want you to be aware of.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Any final cleanup? All those in favor? It's just the budget, folks. Yeah, so just, all those in favor on the budget committee. All those opposed? Abstain? So we have 2 in favor, 1 against. And with that, do we adjourn the special meeting?
Yeah, you'll turn it over and I'll close then.
Okay, so I will turn over the meeting to Mayor Talbot.
All right, that concludes our agenda, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Mr. Jenks. Thank you, Ms. Mankey. All those in favor? Thank you all. I appreciate
Thank
you
you.
all being here for a lengthy marathon session. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Good night, everyone.